current value in cash now. It's yours to do whatever you like. Don't wait for inflation, recession, and interest rates to erode your home's value. Visit Truehold.com and discover how much Truehold will buy your home for today based on its best current value, not what's coming. Call 1-855-300-9993 or visit Truehold.com. The smarter, faster way to cash out on your home's value without having to move. That's Truehold.com.
Nearly a century of informing, entertaining, and serving St. Louis. KMOX.
All right, it's 10:20 on the show on KMOX. Chris Ranji, Amy Marks, Corey, Kevin Wheeler with you here. We're joined by KMOX reporter Scott Jagow, who was at the vigil last night at Tower Grove Park. And first of all, Scott, thank you for joining us. I have to imagine very emotional night last night. We heard some of the audio that you brought back from a lot of the students that spoke, and it sounds like, it just sounds like one of the most horrible things to experience, seeing kids going through the trauma later in the day of having to go through a school shooting like that.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. They were brave in telling their stories of the harrowing hour that they went through on Monday morning. And then also the parents of students there spoke. There was a bus driver. It was raw, and it wasn't a protest. There were not people chanting. It was very quiet for the most part. Then people came up and spoke. The mayor kicked things off by giving her sentiments. And then, he had people coming up every couple of minutes. It was a little hesitant at first. Should I speak or not? But all of their words were powerful. There was a resolve, and there was sadness. I actually saw tears in the eyes of reporters and myself. I mean, I got emotional myself hearing these words. But the one thing that was the thread throughout, it was a lot of anger. I mean, people are really, in fact, one of the students, Brianna Love, who was in the building during the shooting, she said, "I'm upset, I'm sad, but most of all, I'm pissed off." And that's what most people were feeling last night.
Scott, were there any conversations that you had, maybe a line, a phrase, a moment that just stayed with you throughout the night?
Yeah. One of the speakers was Jarrell Williams, who is the father of a student who was in the building yesterday. And he also works for Cure Violence, which, he said he was a violence interrupter in Dutchtown. And he said, I've thought about quitting. And that just hit me really hard. He said, because you guys are breaking my heart, and that I don't think people care. And then he quickly pivoted to, well, obviously people care because you guys are here, and we need to make change. We need to be better. Something has to be different. But yeah, his line about, I've thought about quitting, and his voice was breaking, that really hit me hard.
Scott, how much discussion was there about the two people who lost their lives? Because at that time, I mean, everybody should have known who was lost. I mean, there was some confusion during the day, and obviously information trickles out slowly. But by then, I think we all knew who the victims were.
To be honest, it was more of an overwhelming feeling of why is this happening again? And I'm sure that everyone was thinking about the individual victims, but it came out as a whole community thing. As a community, we have to do something about this. Why is this happening again? Why is it happening here? And so I'm sure that they were in their thoughts, but it was very much a community thing. And people were, in fact, one woman, she said, I'm sure this is not going to be a popular thought, but most of the people here, I'm looking out in the crowd, are light skinned. And most of the people, the young people who are dying by murder in St. Louis are not, and they're not from this neighborhood. We need to do something as a collective. And then an African-American bus driver named Yolanda came on, and she said, this isn't about race. It's about the human race. And she said some of her kids on the bus yesterday, they were all scared. She said some of them worry about going home, whether they have something to eat, whether they actually have a place to stay. And then she, went into the idea of we all have to work on this.
Scott, we saw some video, some pictures from the vigil last night, but can you give us a sense of the people who were there? Was it a ton of young kids? Was it people of all ages? Did they seem to be from the schools? Who was there?
It was a mix of people. There were clearly students and parents, but also it was definitely a people from the community who had, and in fact, the crowd grew as the event went on. So it started, the mayor gave some thoughts, and I would have characterized the crowd as a few dozen at that point. But by the time I left, there were more than 200 easily. And yeah, it was definitely a mixture of people. There were older folks in there. There were younger. And one thing that also stuck out to me was one of the students, her name is Alex Macias, and she told her harrowing story of being in the building. And, she threw her book bag out of the window. And then she decided she couldn't jump because she thought she might die. And she had actually looked into the eyes of the shooter. And she said, I thought I was going to die right then and there. And then he left her there. But at the same time, her teacher had been shot and was in a pool of blood. So she had this I don't even know how to describe it, but someone had come up to her who was not her parent. It was a parent, but it wasn't hers. And, she had kind of got pulled aside with the media, and she just grabbed her and she said, you don't have to talk to anyone else. You don't have to. And to her credit, she said, I want to talk. I want to say what I have to say. So there were a lot of poignant moments in that vigil last night.
Do you know of any plans of further gatherings, of anything else that might happen either today, tomorrow, or down the line?
I don't know of anything that's planned at this point. The vigil was kind of set in motion in the middle of the day yesterday, and then it was in the middle of the Tower Grove Park, and thankfully there was a little bit of rain, but it held off. And so it might have been even appropriate for a little bit of rain, because it was just that kind of mood, and it had begun dark. We're late October, so it just it kind of felt appropriate, the just whole scene and setting for the feelings that people had.
Scott, we really appreciate it. The audio was very moving from last night. Thanks for the work. Thanks for joining us today. We'll definitely see you soon.
All right. Thank you, guys.
You got it. Scott Jagow from the KMOX newsroom was at the vigil last night. I thought that last part was interesting. Just that thought that, telling the one student, you don't have to talk, you don't have to do this. And her response was, no, I want to. It's important. And we'll talk about this later from the psychological perspective. We'll have a doctor on to talk about that. But every one of these kids, every person involved is going to have a different way of dealing with it. I saw a story of a young boy yesterday, high school boy, who basically just went home and kind of didn't do anything. It didn't show much emotion, and just that was his way of dealing with it.
I remember when we spoke to my friend Jeremy Wines, who was at the Highland Park shooting, and he was directly across from the shooter. He said, I think it might help to talk about it. And some people will want to, some people will not. And by the way, we're supposed to have a briefing at 11 o'clock from the St. Louis Police Department. We will be taking that live here on KMOX.
I am looking forward to our discussion about the psychology of suffering trauma like this and grief. There's fear, there's trauma, there's grief. I have a friend who lost a sibling, and he dealt with his grief by not dealing with it, by keeping busy and throwing himself into other activities. And then years down the road, never having dealt with that, it's been very, very difficult for him.
That will be coming up at 12 o'clock. We're going to have Dr. Randy Mazenter from WashU and Barnes Jewish to give us some thoughts on handling this moving forward, recognizing people that need help, where people can get help, how they can seek things. That'll be coming up at 12 o'clock. When we come back after the news, we'll be catching up with Sergeant Betsy Brantner-Smith from the National Police Association here on KMOX.
Social distancing.
Stay 6 feet apart, blah, blah, blah.
For those times you need to be social, you can join KMOX on our socials.
We don't even have to wear a mask.
Connect daily for your 100% recommended dose.
Here are the simple facts.
Of news, information, sports, and so much more.
And it keeps changing every day.
And where can you find KMOX online?
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
And of course, KMOX.com.
That's not the antisocial.
Make that social connection today with KMOX.
This month's Zero Res special. The more you clean, the more you save. Get 3 rooms of carpet clean starting at $129 or 5 rooms starting at $199. A 43% savings. Take $75 off any air duct cleaning package. Call 314-474-2020 or go to ZeroResSTL.com.
This is Corey with Air Comfort Service Heating and Cooling. Shopping around for new HVAC systems is something nobody ever wants on their to-do list. So let's help make things easier with free estimates on new equipment, up to $2,150 on Carrier Cool Cash rebates, and 0% financing for up to 72 months. With over 50 years of award-winning service, you can trust Air Comfort Service Heating and Cooling with your new system install. For details and to get in your comfort zone, contact Air Comfort Service Heating and Cooling at aircomfortservice.com. That's aircomfortservice.com.
At 10:30, we have thunderstorms and 63 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel. We'll be getting more details on the shooting yesterday at Central Visual and Performing Arts High School in about 30 minutes when St. Louis Police, Mayor Tashara Jones, and others have a briefing at police headquarters. It is coming up at 11 o'clock. KMOX will carry it live. Extra security this morning at Rittner School. St. John police say they're upping patrols because of social media threats. Hundreds gathered at Tower Grove Park last night for a vigil to share their emotions over Monday's shooting. In other news, Ash Carter, who served as the 25th Secretary of Defense for the U.S., has died at the age of 68. During his service to the Obama administration, he opened all military combat jobs to women and ended a ban on transgender people joining the armed services. American basketball star Brittany Griner lost her appeal in a Moscow court today to overturn her 9-year prison sentence. The WNBA star had hoped problems with the investigation into her case would reduce her time behind bars. The KMOX forecast: look for gusty thunderstorms this afternoon, and because of repeated downpours, we could see flooding on sidewalks and streets in areas of poor drainage. The high 65, some rain or drizzle at times tonight. Then a chillier evening, the low around 45. Cool tomorrow, the high of 61 with plenty of sunshine. Right now, thunderstorms and 63 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel, KMOX News.
Hey, it's Kenny Mayne. I'm the host of Hey Mayne, the Kenny Mayne Talks to Famous People podcast. Season 1's out there in the universe. You can go back in time, find anybody you want, as long as I interviewed them. Season 2 is coming up Thursday, October 13th. We got Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick together again. Sue Bird is involved. Rex Chapman, Dan Lebitard, Katie Nolan, Allison Becker. Sorry for all the others I interviewed who I left out. Oh, yeah, Soledad O'Brien. She was good. Get it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Tom Ackerman sees clearly thanks to Doctors Birdie and Malhotra. You can too. Go to youreyedoc.com today or call 314-966-5000.
Driven by the Bomarito Automotive Group, the voice of St. Louis, KMOX.
Are you concerned about outliving your money? Well, how would you like to have guaranteed growth and a lifetime of income you may never outlive? Join me, Ben Coons, for the Retirement and Income Radio Show, heard here every Saturday at 3 p.m. on KMOX Radio. You can also call me now for your complimentary retirement and income book at 844-513-SAFE. That's 844-513-7233.
Your home of the Cardinals.
Arnado swings and hits it deep to left field. That ball is out of here.
The Billikens.
Jumper. Yes! Billikens win!
The Chiefs.
Touchdown! Kansas City!
We are America's sports voice, KMOX.
All right, 10:33 on the show. Chris Ranji, Amy Marks, Kevin Wheeler with you. As we mentioned, a lot of different angles we need to approach from yesterday's shooting at CVPA. We'll touch on that, the psychological impact coming up a little bit later on. Obviously, we're going to talk to Special Agent in Charge Jay Greenberg from the FBI from the St. Louis field office. He'll be joining us at 1 o'clock to take a look at it from that angle. But one of them we have to talk about, one of the angles we have to talk about is the work that the St. Louis Police Department did yesterday in getting in there and making sure that it came to a relatively quick end. And of course, we talked about that response yesterday. We heard from the police department, and we have Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith, who is a spokesman for the National Police Association, with us. Talk a bit about that here today. Betsy, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. From what you heard yesterday, did it seem like it sounds to us that this is how it's supposed to work when something like this happens and the police department is called in?
Well, it absolutely does sound like that. I mean, you had the security guards there who apparently were unarmed or unable to engage the shooter, but they immediately were able to let the police department know what was happening, where they were, and you saw St. Louis PD come in and and again, understand what a chaotic situation this is, but they were able to come in, engage that shooter, and stop him within minutes. I mean, that's how it's supposed to go. And, always on everyone's mind is, it used to be Columbine, and now, of course, it's Uvalde. Every cop in this nation thinks about, I don't want to be those guys, Uvalde. And so when we look at what occurred yesterday in St. Louis, their one goal was to stop that shooter and save lives. And that's exactly what happened. And, 2 lives were lost, a teacher and a child. But it could have been so much worse. It sounds like this shooter was quite well armed, had a lot of ammunition. And but brave law enforcement officers ran toward the shots and stopped it.
And that was my question for you, going back to Uvalde. It's all in our minds. We see the mistakes that were made, the hesitation, the delay, and those images of the officers just standing in the hallways. After that happened, after Uvalde, did police forces across the nation go over the protocol again or reinforce that the job is to take down the shooter, to run towards the gunshots?
Well, that was the thing after Uvalde. And again, I'm a police trainer now. I'm a retired cop, police trainer. I've conducted or attended tons and tons of active shooter training. And yes, after Uvalde, every police officer and every police agency in this nation went through that and said, look, let's remember what we're doing. Let's remember our training. Let's remember our goals. Because really, Uvalde was a bizarre anomaly. No one was trained to do that, and no one thinks that was the right thing to do. And that was a failure of leadership, obviously. And now we're starting to find out in the aftermath of that. But in St. Louis, I mean, understand, St. Louis PD, as shorthanded as they are incredibly well trained. And I know I've trained a bunch of them, and they are brave, dedicated officers who are not unfamiliar to gunfire and gun violence. And, every cop in this country, when kids are involved, when a school's involved, you want to get to that shooter, run toward those shots, and stop that situation, because you don't want your community to have to deal with these kinds of tragedies. And there's going to be a lot of, I know you guys are going to talk about it later, trauma that everyone is going to have to go through, including law enforcement. This is a difficult situation, but they performed incredibly well yesterday. And the National Police Association is so proud of these officers and their response.
How much has protocol changed, or do you believe should it change as each one of these school shootings, piles up? Because it seems like, we very clearly have way too many of them in the first place. But as each one happens, how are protocols changing, or should they?
Well, that's a great question. First and foremost, the schools have changed their protocols. Look at yesterday with the school in St. Louis. They had all the doors locked. They had a number of security guards. We didn't have that 5 or 10 years ago even. So school protocols have changed. You want to limit entry into those schools, and it's so unfortunate that he was able to get through those security guards. But then police training continues to change. From Columbine, Colorado in the 90s, where our protocol at that time was just to stop movement, set up a perimeter, and wait for SWAT. Now you go in. I don't care if you're one patrol officer who is, no one else is coming. You go in, you go toward the shots. If there's 2 of us, we form a team. If there's 3 of us, we form a team, and we go in with whatever we have, whether it's just handguns. Everybody always thinks, oh, it's a big SWAT team going in. That's actually kind of a rarity. It's just, generally speaking, patrol officers, maybe a school resource officer. We go in, we go toward the shots, and we stop that shooter. And you know what? If we get hurt, that's what we're there for. We are there to stop the violence.
Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with us from the National Police Association. As you mentioned, you are a retired police officer, 29 years on the job. So the next question that I have for you is your own experience, the experience of your fellow officers, the officers that you train. I mean, you've had a lot of contact with people. When you get this call, when you are on the way, or once you're on the scene, how much of what you do is instinctive based on training? How much is their thought process? And I know there has to be some thought because you're figuring out problems on the fly. What is that like?
Well, it's chaos, because when you're going, especially when you're going to a school or a workplace where there's a lot of people, you're going to, the minute you go in, you don't know who the bad guy is. You don't know how many bad guys there are. And so, people are going to be screaming, officer, he's here, he's there, this and that. And we don't know, are these the good guys? Are these the bad guys? Do we have to render aid? What do we need to do? So there's a lot of chaos, and you have to mentally fight through that to stay on your mission, which is try to move as safely and tactically as possible toward the shooter. And then we revert back to our training. And one of the things we did on my agency was patrol officers, because we knew we were going to be the first ones. I ran a patrol team for the last 6 years of my career. Is on the weekends when school was closed, we would get the keys to a grade school or a high school in our town, and we would go and just conduct our own active shooter drills as teammates to determine how is it that we are going to respond. Do we know the layout of the school? Do we know whether the classrooms are locked or unlocked? And we would practice, not a big formal training, but just practice, talk, discuss, and that happens a lot all over this country. Understand, most police departments are not the size of St. Louis PD or St. Louis County. Most police departments in this nation are less than 10 officers. Look at, again, Uvalde, Texas is a tiny, tiny town. So you're not going to have a big SWAT team or a bunch of patrol officers in most school shootings. You are going to have small town patrol officers or deputies responding. And so we have all been trained similarly, but it's not just your training, it's your mindset. And your mindset has to be, we're going to stop this threat and save those kids.
As far as what happens in the moment, what should the expectation be of a police officer who's trying to balance his or her own safety with trying to save the life of somebody who's in the middle of a threat?
Well, the truth is, when you sign up to do this job, I mean, we're not suicidal and everybody wants to get home to their families. But we know when we go into an active shooter situation that it may be our life being given to save the life of one of our community members. And we all know that. We talk about it from the academy on. And quite frankly, nobody becomes a cop to get rich. We become a cop because we have that sense of mission that I want to be that person that helps keep my community safe. So I'll be honest, and I talk to thousands of cops every year. I really have never talked to a police officer who says, well, yeah, I don't know. I don't really, I'm going to just watch my citizens die. We don't do that. We know that we may have to sacrifice our own life, but that's why training is so important, because the ideal situation, of course, is what happened yesterday, where we're able to save the community members, we're able to save those kids and faculty and not get hurt ourselves. That's the ultimate goal.
And we've talked a lot about the trauma that the kids, the teachers, the faculty, the parents are suffering right now, and how important it is to have counselors and therapists available. What about for the police officers who run into these buildings and see kids who have been shot, who see kids dead. That is something that I can imagine seeing that and then having to move forward with your day-to-day life. Cops who go into this types of situation, do they have counseling available to them afterwards?
That's such an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. Yes, in a department the size of St. Louis, they're going to have critical incident debriefers, we call them, mental health personnel, combined with something we call peer support, where police officers receive special training as peers to sit down with the officers who had to go in and say, how are you feeling? What are you thinking about this? Because right now, those officers involved in what happened yesterday are still very much in cop mode. You know, they've got to write reports and give interviews and do all of that. So in 5 or 6 days, they're going to finally be able to sit down. And this goes too for the dispatchers, the firefighters, the paramedics. They're going to, in 5 or 6 days, be able to sit down and think and really process emotionally what happened and what they saw and how they dealt with it. And that's the time that they need to sit down with these critical incident debriefers and these peer support personnel and start on that healing process. Because you're right, the kids, the staff, the parents, the neighbors in the area are all going to be facing trauma. And so are those law enforcement officers. And law enforcement hasn't always done a real good job of taking care of the mental health of our personnel, but we've come a long way. And I have no doubt that St. Louis has protocols in place where they will care for these officers to get them back, back onto the street again and back keeping their community safe, because that's why they're there.
Betsy, we really appreciate the information. Thank you for joining us on KMOX today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You got it. Sergeant Betsy Brantner-Smith of the National Police Association, who coincidentally was actually coming through town yesterday, I think right after all of this was unfolding, but a lot of information there. And certainly a lot more for us to explore. I mentioned the psychological aspect of this, the FBI's involvement, all of these things will be coming up and more, plus some personal stories too. We haven't had a chance yet to talk much about the two deceased, 15-year-old Alexandria Bell, 61-year-old teacher Jean Kushka. We will talk to a former student of Miss Kushka coming up a little bit later on. That'll be Lakeisha Bosley, state representative, who actually had her as a teacher, I believe, in junior high. So we'll be talking to her a little bit later on in the show as well. Coming up, we'll tell you what's trending next on the show.
What do you have for us today, Charlotte?
Charlotte is the little sister of the Tooth Fairy. Charlotte is the Junk Fairy.
If you have stuff in your shed that you haven't used in the past 12 months,
yes,
you're not storing stuff, you've got junk.
Turn your storage shed into a shed that you can use again.
Give yourself some space to maneuver.
Call 1-800-GOT-JUNK.
We make junk disappear.
All you have to do is point.
Call 1-800-GOT-JUNK.
Or visit 1-800-GOT-JUNK.com.
If you are a business owner and your business has 5 or more employees, and you managed to survive the past couple of years with COVID restrictions and shutdowns, inflation, supply chain issues, and you're thinking, man, I could use a little bit of a break, go to getrefunds.com. Getrefunds.com. Your company, if you have 5 or more employees and managed to survive the COVID years, you could be eligible to receive a payroll tax rebate of up to $26,000 per employee. The team of tax attorneys that they have put together are highly trained in this little-known payroll tax refund program and have already returned $1 billion to businesses, and they can help you too. And that's right, it's a tax refund program. That means it's not a loan and there's no payback. It is a refund of your taxes. And all types of businesses can qualify, even if your business took PPP, if you're a nonprofit, or if you saw an increase in sales. To find out if your business qualifies, just go to getrefunds.com.
The good and bad with home improvement projects. The good, you save $1 or $2. The bad,
Kevin, there's no hot water.
so you move on to the car.
Kevin, what's with the car?
Good news, you can recover from these.
Kevin!
Well, most all of them. But when it comes to your retirement, a mistake can be devastating. Call Steve All and the All Financial Group. They've been helping folks plan for retirement for years. That's why they've been able to correct do-it-yourself problems before they're problems. Get your complimentary assessment of where you are now and look at some of the retirement boxes you haven't even thought of.
Kevin!
You can't YouTube your retirement. Call Steve today, 636-230-8824. That's 636-230-8824. Get more details at yourmoneymattersstl.com.
Investment advisory services offered through All Financial Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Insurance and annuity products offered through Stephen All, Missouri license 8039738.
The show, sponsored by Straight Realty, your St. Louis area experts. Why pay more than four? 314-441-4444. They're back.
Three best friends. Yeah, the three amigos. Yeah.
Kevin, Chris, and Amy. The show.
Arch back in on the show on a Tuesday. Chris Ranji, Amy Marks, course, Kevin Wheeler with you here. Now, we're going to go through our trending segment. Trending is sponsored by Old Town Donuts in Florissant and Cottleville. Certainly, though, not the same tone that we normally have. Obviously, in the days to come, we'll get back to that. A couple of quick things. One thing, and we'll bring this up a little bit later on at 1 o'clock. We'll be visiting with Jay Greenberg of the FBI. He's the special agent in charge here at the St. Louis field office. Will be joining us. One of the things that is trending related to the shooting at CVPA is the FBI being a part of the investigation as they try to figure out the motive in the shooting. And I'll be curious to ask him about that, the importance of that. And, because it's not going to change the outcome of this particular incident, but maybe they learn things that kind of, I guess you just add it to the pile, right? I mean, you have all these different motives that have come into play with all the past shootings. I guess it's important to understand. I'm sure it's also somewhat important to have just closure to the case. People at least understand what you can understand about why, even though the why always is inadequate in these stories.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're never going to fully get past what happened, if you're a friend or a family member, or even if you just went to the school and didn't know anybody. It could be a thing that you don't ever really truly overcome. And that could be true for a lot of people. But I think of the Las Vegas shooter.
Yeah.
Nobody ever had any idea. And they still don't know why he did that.
Right.
But he killed a bunch of people, but we don't know why he did it. He didn't leave any notes.
Right.
He didn't leave any indication. They researched and they investigated and they still couldn't find a motive. That has to be even more difficult for a family member when it's something that doesn't even have an explanation for it. Like, the explanation can help you kind of move forward a little bit, but when you have no idea why something happened, that's the kind of thing that you never, ever truly reconcile.
Yeah, it's again, going through the trending topics. One thing we were talking about in the room today was how this is our whole world right now. This is our community. This is our neighborhood. And yet there are so many things happening all across the country, all across the world. I saw in the trending that Russia is losing is a trend because people are rallying. It's not a specific headline that prompted the Russia is losing. It's just some various tactics that the Ukraine has taken, people saying, hey, Putin's going to lose this war, Ukraine saying we will stand and fight. And that is something that, think of how long that war has been going on with people hunkered down in shelters. I know later on in the show, we are going to talk to Miriam Berger of the Washington Post about the protests that are still going on in Iran. And it's a lot to think about. There's a line from a T.S. Eliot poem, and it says, humankind cannot bear very much reality. And sometimes I feel like that when you see the grief that's down the street and then also what's happening across the world. It's a lot to take in.
There's so much reality.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, I mean, and always. And by the way, I'm not sure if you mentioned it again, Kevin, but at 11 o'clock, we will have a briefing from the police department about what happened. We're going to carry that live.
Right. And not exactly sure, what we're going to learn. But I mean, at this point, I would imagine it's going to continue to be probably not regular updates, but just somewhat constant updates about what they're going to figure out. We do know, obviously, the big parts, and I think it's important to, as we go along, and we'll tell, we're going to talk to people who knew Gene Kushka, for an example. We're going to talk to Lakeisha Bosley later on, state representative who had Gene Kushka as a teacher. It's important to tell their stories too, and that's something that I know I've been doing the last, what's it been now, 15 hours, 16 hours since the name started coming out, is reading the stories about Gene, about Alexandria Bell, the two innocent people who passed away in that shooting yesterday. And it doesn't solve anything, but I don't know. It seems like to me a natural part of this is learning about those people, learning about their families. And I don't know if it helps. To me, it does. It helps kind of put you in their place a little bit. Empathy matters when it comes to stories like this. It matters when it comes to issues like this. And without that empathy, it's hard to move forward to try to make things correct. If you just move on like nothing else happened, well, then nothing else happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's we have to hit these things head on. We have to tackle them, and part of doing that is acknowledging that it happened, and then acknowledging the reasons that it happened and who was lost while that happened. If you do all of those things, the hope is that you turn it into something positive down the road. You're not going to ever get these people back, and lives are ruined for some folks here in this city, and that's the heartbreaking part of it. But there's nothing you can do except for try to get better from it. And I don't think as a society we do enough to try to get better from things like this. I think there are people who want to, but there aren't enough people who have the appetite to really tackle the problems that we're facing.
I want to add this story because, Wheeler, you mentioned the teacher and the student whose lives were taken from them yesterday. Alexandria Bell was a month away from her 16th birthday, and her father said he was planning her sweet 16 birthday party, and now he's planning her funeral. And I don't know how you add to that. I mean, you have a father who was going to celebrate. Think about that special moment, that time in a young girl's life, and we build up that birthday. It's a special moment. You're becoming a young adult, and instead of all of the ideas that he had for her Sweet 16 celebration, he is now planning her funeral because that life was cut short,
right?
Was taken away.
Yeah, and then of course the other end of the spectrum, Gene Kushka. I'm seeing all the comments from her daughter that she was coming close to retirement, really enjoying all of the things that go along with that, but also was doing what she loved to do too. Mm-hmm. Hearing those stories definitely drives home the meaning. We'll continue to tell those stories as we move along. And a reminder coming up. Right around 11 o'clock, we're expecting an update from the St. Louis Police Department on all of the things that they've learned. And Carol Daniel will join us shortly after that here on the show.
Hey, it's Bill Matthews on behalf of Beast Plumbing. We want to educate you on what a hose bib is. A hose bib is the small faucet attachment on the outer wall of your home that facilitates access to water in your backyard or your driveway or maybe outside of your business. Well, Beast Plumbing has a special in the month of October. The deal is $25 off replacement of the hose bib if you're seeing issues with yours. Maybe it's leaking, something's wrong with it, the handle's broke, or $50 off the new hose bib that they can install for you. Beast Plumbing does small jobs and they do large jobs, commercial or residential. Call on Beast Plumbing. You should have Beast Plumbing's contact information in your phone, so in the event of a plumbing emergency or you want to take advantage of this deal, you can get a hold of them. I'm going to give you their brand new number you can call in just a moment. But again, it's $25 off replacement hose bibs and $50 off new hose bibs from Beast Plumbing. That's BEIS plumbing.com, or call them at 314-500-LEAK. Again, the new number, 314-500-LEAK. Tell them Bo sent you to Beast Plumbing.
Manor Grove has been caring for seniors for over a century. Everyone at Manor Grove is treated like family, and that's exactly how our residents should feel, like family. Our staff strives to make Manor Grove feel like home. Be assured, your loved one will be well taken care of at Manor Grove. The entire Manor Grove team views everyone inside as family and looks forward to seeing residents and coworkers every day. See for yourself at manorgrove.com and take our virtual tour. Welcome home to Manor Grove.
For 25 years, ABC7 political reporter Charles Thomas gave you the straight news. Now, he's giving you real talk on the governor's race.
These Democrats are into name calling. They'll call people a racist, a misogynist, a homophobic person, or whatever, because they want to distract from the fact that they've accomplished so little in public office. And it's time people woke up and recognized that. J.B. Pritzker, what's he ever done outside of being born on third base and telling the world he hit a triple? J.B. Pritzker and his people called Darren Bailey an extremist. Darren Bailey? I met the man. He's a family farmer, somebody who understands what it's like to go to work every day, somebody who's fair-minded. I could trust this guy. I could trust this guy. Yeah, a farmer from Southern Illinois. Yeah, farmer from Southern Illinois.
Paid for by people who play by the rules pack.
KMOX, KEZK HD2, K254CR, St. Louis.
The legendary voice of St. Louis, KMOX. Always live on the free Odyssey app.
Men suffering from erectile dysfunction or PE, regardless of age or past medical history, you'll see instant results on your first visit at Paramount Men's Medical Center. And for a limited time, your initial consultation and first treatment are totally free. Call now, 314-720-8081.
Fall into a hiring spree with Indeed. Their end-to-end hiring solution makes it easy to attract, interview, and hire candidates. Sponsor a job and instantly receive a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit.
Mid-America's most trusted source for news, KMOX.
At 11 o'clock, we have rain and 62 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel with our top story. We're standing by to get more details on the school shooting yesterday. The St. Louis Police Department, St. Louis Mayor Tashara Jones, and others are set to hold a briefing at police headquarters after the shooting at Central Visual and Performing Arts High School. KMOX's Kevin Killeen is there. He joins us live with what we know they'll say thus far.
Well, Carol, we expect the chief will update us on the investigation. There's some obvious questions that were still unanswered yesterday, and they may be unanswered today. What was the motive of the shooter? We know that in the afternoon hours and overnight, they've been processing some of the things taken from his home, from his car, looking for clues. Was there any kind of written statement where he explained his intentions at the school? There could be more said about the conditions of the victims, those who were injured, and the identity of those who were killed has not yet been confirmed by police, although it's been all over social media. And so we just expect a general update on anything that can tell us about why this happened and what they're doing to make sure it doesn't happen again. At police headquarters, Kevin Killeen, KMOX News.
And we will bring that news conference to you live right here on KMOX. After Monday's shooting, Alderwoman Pam Boyd put out a call for clergy. The first on the scene was Reverend Roderick Burton. He is senior pastor at New Northside Missionary Baptist Church.
Unfortunately, I've had 6 members murdered, so I had some idea what type of stresses people go through when when they're dealing with that situation.
There is extra security at Rittner School. St. John police say they upped patrols because of threats on social media. In other news, Jana Elementary School is getting tested again.
It's the Army Corps of Engineers' turn to test Jana Elementary School in Florissant, where radioactive contamination was found before by a private company. Ashley Marshall is a resident.
I would have never moved to an area, had I known anything like that, especially knowing that I had young children and was planning to have more kids too.
The 50-year-old school is along a creek contaminated by waste from atomic bomb materials made during World War II. The school has been closed, with students having virtual classes the rest of the year. Stuart McMillan, KMOX News.
A strong earthquake has rocked the northern Philippines, but officials say no serious damage is expected and no tsunami warning has been issued. The U.S. Geological Survey says the magnitude 6.4 quake was centered about 10 miles below the surface on the island. The First Mid-Bank and Trust business desk, Adidas, has ended its partnership with the rapper formerly known as Kanye West over his offensive and anti-Semitic remarks. The German sportswear company said in a statement today that it does not tolerate anti-Semitism and any other sort of hate speech, and called his recent comments and actions unacceptable, hurtful, and dangerous. Taking a look at the Dow at this hour, the Dow is up 256 points at 31,756. Checking the KMOX forecast.
It's a soggy Tuesday afternoon, but we really need the rain. Periods of rain, some spot thunderstorms, heavy downpours at times, and windy. The winds have turned to the northwest, so we're in the 50s now as we go through the afternoon. Think dropping temperatures. Tonight, rain ends mainly late. It's colder, 42 Wednesday. Sunny, windy, chilly, 62. Clear and 37 Wednesday night. Thursday, sunny, 62. I'm meteorologist Dave Murray for the Voice of St. Louis, KMOX.
Heavy rain and 62 degrees downtown at the Arch. Again, we're standing by for a briefing from St. Louis Police at headquarters, and Mayor Jones, as well as others, will bring that to you live as soon as it occurs. I'm Carol Daniel, KMOX News Time, 11:04.
The show, sponsored by Straight Realty, your St. Louis area experts. Why pay more than four? 314-441-4444.
It's Tuesday on the show on KMOX. Chris Ranji, Amy Marks, Scores, Kevin Wheeler with you here. Obviously, most of what we're doing today is continuing coverage of the shooting yesterday at CVPA. We are still waiting for a press conference to begin at police headquarters. Of course, they're going to be updating us on any new information that they've gathered since yesterday. In the time we left the air yesterday, guys, we didn't know a whole lot. We knew that there were two people who had been killed. I think we had just seen the name of Jean Kushka come out, but that was, I think, after the show that started to make the rounds, I guess, from her family via social media. Later on in the afternoon and evening, we found out the name of Alexandria Bell. They've also identified the shooter. We aren't going to spend a lot of time talking about him. He was identified as Orlando Harris, 19-year-old graduate of that school last year. And I'm sure at some point, again, the work will be done on motive and all of that. And I know the FBI is helping St. Louis police with that part of the investigation. And we will have Jay Greenberg in from the St. Louis field office, the special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office, coming up at 1 o'clock here on the show. One thing we did learn yesterday, and I'm may or may not be a part of what they expand upon today, but the shooter came in loaded to do damage. I mean, he came in with 12 30-round capacity magazines, so 360 rounds, and really only the ability to have a quick response is what kept this from being a lot worse, as if it's not already terrible and tragic that two people are lost.
And police have said, by the way, that they did not want to give any information as to how he got inside.
Right. That's still something we're waiting to hear about, yeah.
Well, in the explanation we heard yesterday, it might have been later in the day, that they didn't want to give any ideas to people. And so I don't know if they're going to change their thought process on that.
Could be a good
point. The
point.
school definitely needs to know, and I'm sure they do.
Right.
I mean, obviously they know, but and how to correct that. But if it's something that is now a problem or a potential issue for other schools, they need to know as well.
For sure.
So they know how to try and reinforce their buildings so that people can't get in. And again, I don't think I could say this enough. I hate the fact this person was even armed to be able to do this in the first place. But since we live in an environment where that is possible, we have to do everything we can to make sure it's tougher for a guy like this to get into the school and do what he did.
It's a good point about, not wanting that information out there for people to copy it. All right, let's send you, I should say, out to police headquarters. Press conference getting underway now.
The threat here is over. However, we are going to continue to be vigilant in our schools and in our neighborhoods to be present and to be alert for situations that could create harm to our community. And in light of that, I want to talk about the importance of being aware, the old saying of see something, say something, whether it be a family member, a neighbor, a student, a peer. If you're aware of an individual who appears to be suffering from some kind of mental illness or distress, and they begin speaking about purchasing firearms or causing harm to others, we encourage you to reach out to somebody and to report that so that we can get help to that individual. It's important that all of us be engaged so that we can try to intercede as early as possible in a person's life to try and prevent a tragedy from occurring. This morning, we want to. I don't have any additional information on the status of the victims. We're not aware of any of them having been released since yesterday. Those who were admitted. As we find out as they're released, we'll let you know. But I would like to do is share some of the images of the weapon that was used by the suspect. I know yesterday one of the questions was how many weapons did the suspect use or have in his possession at the time of the incident. And we know now that he had in his possession one rifle, an AR-15 style rifle, a .223 caliber. I think we've got an image of that we can put up for you.
So what we're looking at now at the press conference at police headquarters is they're getting ready to show a picture of the weapon that was used or one like it.
Note that I'm just, first time I saw it large, there is no forward handguard on that rifle, which is unusual. See the gas tube going back there. The suspect, in addition to the rifle, brought in a large quantity of ammunition. He had 7 magazines of ammunition on a chest rig that he wore. He also had an additional 8 magazines of ammunition in a field bag that he had carried. And this doesn't include the number of magazines that he left and dumped on the stairway in the corridors along the way. But it appears that he came into the building with more than 600 rounds of ammunition on his person. One of the other questions that came up yesterday was there a manifesto that was left when the FBI had gone through the vehicle that had been parked there that he used to drive to the school. There was some paperwork in it. The detectives had gone through much of it last evening. There was a document that he had created, handwritten, and in there he spoke about his desire to engage in this incident, to conduct this school shooting. I'll read one portion from that notebook in which he had written. He wrote, quote, "I don't have any friends. I don't have any family. I've never had a girlfriend. I've never had a social life. I've been an isolated loner my entire life. This was the perfect storm for a mass shooter." End quote. So in reading this, we could see, some of what's going on inside his mind. He feels isolated. He feels alone, quite possibly angry and resentful of others who have what appeared to him to be healthy relationships, and so a desire to lash out. So this goes back to what I spoke about earlier, the critical importance of all of us being engaged with our family members, with our peers at work or at school or in our neighborhood, because when we're more engaged with one another, we're more aware of what each person is going through, we can do what we can to try and seek help for them, even if that's just reporting it to authorities. At this time, I believe the mayor would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning. Last night, I attended a vigil in Tower Grove Park with more than 100 people who gathered to honor the victims of yesterday's tragedy. They shared a wide range of emotions: frustration, anger, grief, and others felt impassioned to do more for their community. But even for those who didn't feel the need to stand up and speak, I know that tragic incidents like this can traumatize our youth, our children, our teachers, and the larger community. Let me be absolutely clear. The scourge of gun violence that continues to claim the lives of our children and families in their communities is a national emergency. It's a public health crisis that requires federal action. But at the local level, we want our community members to know that they are not alone. If you're experiencing trauma or other mental health concerns, or just need someone to talk to about this, you can for free by calling VHR's 24/7 365 helpline and Youth Connection helpline. You can dial 988, or you can call, if you're a young person and want to talk to someone, you can call 314-819-8802, or you can text Be Heard, BHEARD, or 31658. In addition, I want to reiterate my sincerest appreciation for the police officers, the fire department, our school security, school staff, and others that responded quickly without hesitation. Some parents, like myself, woke up this morning wondering if it's safe to send their children back to school in St. Louis. My son woke up around 1:30 this morning to call me from upstairs instead of coming downstairs. That's what kids do nowadays. Because he needed to talk. And as a mother, you try to reassure your children, reassure your child that everything's going to be okay. And I honestly felt like the safest place and the best place for him today was to go back to school, to be with school counselors who are going to be there to help him process, his teachers that care about him and the staff that care about him. But unfortunately, mass shootings have happened in almost every corner of our country. Suburban schools in Columbine and Parkland, a rural community in Uvalde. Because of this grim reality, the St. Louis Police Department, St. Louis Public Schools, our charter schools, and the Mayor's Office of Children, Youth, and Families have been conducting frequent trainings on how to respond to emergency situations like what we experienced yesterday. Trainings and active shooter drills are essential to ensuring that they responded as quickly as they did. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Michael Brown, Deputy Superintendent of Student Support Services for St. Louis Public Schools. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Good morning. At this time, we are supporting our school and the community. This morning, we activated 3 different resources. We have an in-person site for our 2 schools. We also have a virtual site that we email to those schools, staff, students, and parents as well. And we also increased our resources that we have online. If you go to slps.org, there's a mental health tab that will direct you to many of our resources that we use, that our students use, and that our staff use. So at this time, we are working on a long-term plan. We're collaborating with our community partners, as well as the Mayor's Office and the U.S. Department of Education. So we're working at this time to really come up with a next steps long-term plan for what we're about to encounter with our students and staff and families as well. Thank you.
Good morning. And regarding the training that officers receive from St. Louis Public Schools, it was a collaboration with St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, where we, alongside of them, were engaged in an active shooter training that took place about a month and a half ago. And from that training, a lot of the things that the officers exhibited yesterday were the things that we learned during that session. We continue to have those ongoing sessions with our people, despite the fact that we know that we're in that space. So these are some of the things that we've been initiating and putting in place. Dr. Brown talked about long-term. The goal for us is to try to make schools as safe as possible, but to make sure that we're prepared for whatever comes to those buildings. So officers were aware of what happened, understood the magnitude of what was happening, but we were also prepared for what was happening.
Can you give your name?
I'm sorry, DeAndre, DeAndre, last name Davis, Davis. And I'm the Director of Safety and Security for St. Louis Public Schools.
All right, we'll open it up for questions.
Can you tell us where the suspect was shot inside the school? What room?
So that would be on the third floor, a room adjacent to the library. I don't know the room number offhand, but it was on the third floor.
Can you confirm for us where he tried? Can you confirm for us the gun show where he tried to buy this gun, and then the private dealer? What do you know about that? Who was that, and will there be any kind of recourse for that sale?
Sure. So we're not going to talk a lot about those particular types of items because there's an ongoing investigation. We're partnered, of course, with the ATF looking into those matters. So, but there is an ongoing investigation. We've been able to develop quite a bit of information, and we need to pursue that. That's going to take a little bit of time.
What are your thoughts, though, on the fact that he was able to buy this from a private dealer, private sale?
So, in generally speaking, when you go to a firearms dealer, there's a background check that's done. It's possible to do a individual sale. There are some loopholes in the law, which they're referred to. And what that does is it removes any backstop that might have existed that would have prevented someone from getting a firearm when they should not have had it, whether they be a convicted felon or a person with a mental health issue. So I think it's important that we have background checks whenever anybody buys a firearm so that we can ensure that that backstop isn't removed. Because that's a hindrance to ensure the safety of the community as a whole.
Is that what happened in this situation, or did you buy it?
I was just speaking in general terms. In this particular case, ma'am, we're going to go through our investigation, make a determination as to what happened, and if we're able to proceed with any criminal charges, we'll do that.
You said he had no priors, but did he have juvenile priors?
So that's all closed record, everything related to juvenile.
Based on the level of ammunition, how impactful was it that you had more than the number of officers in that area?
Yeah, it was critical. You know, the 600 rounds is a lot of ammunition. I don't know if anybody's a shooter or not, but it doesn't take long to burn through a magazine as you're looking down a long corridor or up or down a stairwell or into a classroom. This could have been a horrific scene. It was not, by the grace of God, and that the officers were as close as they were and responded in the manner that they did, coordinating not only with the school officers, but with EMS, our dispatch center. Everybody worked well together. We've trained in this before. As you've heard, I went through our active shooter class about a month ago, but everybody in our department goes through it. We do it about once a year. It's good to have that reinforced. I was speaking to a commander this morning. And one of the best parts about it is when we sign up for the class, you're not signing up, you know, as your entire unit or squad. You're just signing up with other random officers from across the city. So you may not even know who they are when you go through your training, which worked out well here. Because we had officers from a number of different districts, a number of different specialized assignments who may not even have known one another. But because of the training, they all knew what needed to be done. They created their teams and they went in and they took action. Sure.
You had said yesterday it was a little unclear what happened at the point of entry, whether those security guards were armed. So I'd like to ask Mr. Andre Davis, the Director of School Security, could you tell us what's known at this time about, at that checkpoint where he got in, did, some of the students said that security guards only had nightsticks or flashlights. Are these security guards, were they armed with guns to stop this sort of thing from even starting?
So he did not enter a checkpoint.
Yeah, so again, let's not talk about it. Okay.
Understood.
Yeah, thank you.
But
He did not enter a checkpoint.
the officers are not that are stationed in schools are not armed. The officers who respond to calls to schools are armed. We have about 25 officers that are armed with St. Louis Public Schools, but the ones that are stationed inside of buildings are not armed.
And in light of this, had they been armed, could they have stopped it before we even had a shooting? Should you have armed security guards to protect our children?
For some people, that would cause a stir of some sort. But for us, we thought it's best for us, for our officers, for our the normalcy of school for kids to not have officers armed in the school. Again, our mobile officers, they visit the schools every day,
But I mean,
around the clock.
Is that going to be under review? I mean, have we learned our lesson that all feelings aside about a kid seeing the sight of a gun, it's better to see a security guard with a gun than a guy in camo coming in.
And that's
Are you gonna
perspective.
review that to have?
That's perspective. Yes, sir.
Y'all
So, I mean-
mentioned yesterday how the school and the police department itself were proud of how everyone responded. Could both of y'all just give a couple of quick statements about that? And is it the shooter training drill, everyone working together? Is that why this was kind of stopped before it could have gotten worse? Obviously, it was a tragedy, but they did things right.
Absolutely. Chief Sachs's point, our officers were there directing the responding officers directly where the shooter was, the outline of the building, how to get to the building. They were part of the teams that made entry into the building. So that collaboration worked. The drills worked. The kids worked. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. They barricaded those doors. They got away from those windows. And when it was time to evacuate, they did the best they could. They got out of that building.
Chief,
All right, thank
wait,
you all.
what
Chief,
about-
a couple more questions,
Thank
you all.
Chief,
We've been sending emails for the last 12 hours.
Thank you all.
Hey, can we get
So that sounds like the end of the press conference. Boy, there's
Kind of
a
an
lot
abrupt end there,
It
huh?
was an abrupt end. Obviously, a lot to go through there. We're going to recap a lot of this as we go through. In fact, when Kevin Killeen is done at police headquarters, we'll get him on and kind of recap what we heard and maybe if there are things that we didn't get to. But obviously, a few quick things. AR-15 style rifle, more than 600 rounds. So we had heard initially the report as of last night was a dozen 30-round magazines. Well, it's way more than that. We're talking 600 rounds. They did find some form of explanation from the shooter.
A handwritten document in a notebook.
Right. It was essentially a note that said, I don't have any friends. I'll paraphrase it. Basically, I've been a loner my whole life, and it was all the perfect recipe for this. It's essentially what it was. We'll play the clip a little bit later on, but they did find some motive. There are questions now about how the gun was acquired and whether or not it was done illegally. It sounds like there's some question about that.
Did say it was a private dealer?
Right.
A
And
private purchase.
Police wouldn't comment because it's still an ongoing investigation, but that question was raised about whether or not it was a regular upfront dealer or if it was I think it said a private owner or a private sale. Either way, that's going to be followed up upon. Chief Sack did mention some loopholes that could have been a part of how this happened, how he got the gun the way that he did. But again, more on that will be coming a little bit later on. We also heard from DeAndre Davis there. He's the director of safety and security from St. Louis Schools. Our Kevin Killeen asked him the question about the how the shooter made entry.
Yeah.
And that DeAndre Davis did say, and this is a quote, the shooter did not enter through a checkpoint. Now, they quickly moved.
And there was an interruption there.
We don't want to talk
Yeah.
about that. And again, it's ongoing. And you mentioned, Raj, the reason why they may not want this to be planted in the heads of other potential shooters. They would like to maybe we're just assuming that maybe that's wrong, but there was a little interruption there. But he was also asked on the follow-up by Kevin Killeen whether or not the security was armed. So we now have our clear answer. They were not. The security's personnel are not armed with firearms. They may have the batons and obviously the nightstick and the flashlight, but they do not have guns. And that was still somewhat in question up until this. But DeAndre Davis did say also security did exactly what they were supposed to. They barricaded those entries. They called police. Police got there quickly. So this is what we learned from there and more, and we'll find some clips from that. We'll catch up with Kevin Killeen in just a little bit as well. So we've got a lot of ground to still kind of make up on this. And, boy, I mean, I think we got some questions answered there, but as with these kinds of investigation, there are still more.
Yes, and we did not get an update yet on those who were transported to the hospital yesterday. But again, as you mentioned, there was a document handwritten, and the police chief, Michael Sack, did read part of that. As you mentioned, Kevin said, I don't have any friends. I don't have any family. I never had a girlfriend. I never had a social life. So he was an, quote, isolated loner. And he said this was a perfect storm for a mass shooting.
So certainly a lot more for us to discuss. We're going to catch up with Kevin Killeen coming up in a little bit. As I mentioned, at 1 o'clock, we're going to have Jay Greenberg from the FBI, special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office, to follow up on more of these, and we'll have continuing coverage here on KMOX.
Looking for smart, intelligent conversation in your afternoon?
Isn't it amazing to you guys, observing life, how smart the American public is? Because we all knew that.
Then you need The Dave Glover Show.
Whenever I did jury trials, I always trusted the juries. Like somehow they took it seriously and they typically came to the right conclusion, even if it was against me. Like, yeah, you got me on that. And I feel that way about the American people as a whole. Like, we're smart.
Make the smart choice. The Dave Glover Show. Weekdays beginning at 2 on KMOX.
Hello, this is Chad Clayman again with ClaymanGroup.com, KLAMEN Group.com, 946-9999. We're locally and family owned, and we bought over 50 properties this year. A lot of times people are looking to sell their property as is, and maybe they've talked to another investor and didn't get a good offer, and we came in and made a better offer. Because of our economies of scale, we can usually pay more than all other investors in town and provide probably one of the strongest offers you'll get. Reach out to us today, KLAMEN Group.com or 314-946-9999.
What's more important than profit? At Easter Fence Deck and Renovations, our family name is, you, our customers and friends are. A job well done and doing what's right is more important than profit. Hi, I'm Chuck Easter. In business for over 60 years, we've not lost sight of the fact that a good name is more desirable than great riches. When the Easter name is on your fence, deck, or sunroom, you know it was done right with integrity, pride, and great care. Our focus is on you, not our bottom line. Call 314-892-8500 or easterfence.com.
PNC is proud to spotlight business leaders on C-Speak, the language of executives. In honor of Inspirational Role Model Month, we're sharing segments from a few of our most motivating guests. Visit KMOX.com/PNC C-Speak to hear entire podcasts. C-Speak provides digital storytelling from a C-level perspective on relevant, forward-thinking business approaches. Get caught up on a podcast you might have missed at KMOX.com/PNC C-Speak. PNC C-Speak, the language of executives.
Recent impacts with inflation, ongoing COVID concerns, and geopolitical conflict have us all and the markets on edge. Heisey Advisory Group understands the importance of having a customized strategy for retirement, especially during uncertain times, to help ensure these concerns don't have an impact on your retirement. Heisey Advisory Group is a St. Louis-based, family-owned and operated holistic retirement planning firm. Our team has defined a process that puts together all the pieces of the financial puzzle, working with all of your service providers to help develop an individualized plan that grows with you as your life changes and your needs evolve. If you're not confident that your retirement plan is on track to deliver the lifestyle you want amid historic levels of uncertainty, call us today at 314-328-4400. That's 314-328-4400.
Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Firm provides insurance services. Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC.
At 11:30, we have rain and 62 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel. We now know a little more about what was going on in the suspect's mind before Monday's deadly school shooting. During a briefing you just heard live on KMOX, St. Louis Police Chief Michael Sachs said the FBI went through the shooter's vehicle and found a handwritten document in a notebook where the suspect described his desire to conduct the school shooting.
He wrote, quote, "I don't have any friends. I don't have any family. I've never had a girlfriend. I've never had a social life. I've been an isolated loner my entire life. This was the perfect storm for a mass shooter." End quote.
The chief said he quite possibly felt angry and resentful of others that had what appeared to him to be healthy relationships, and he had a desire to lash out. CBS News correspondent Jen Krasula now with details of a tragedy involving a delivery driver.
An Amazon delivery driver in his late 40s was found dead outside a home in Excelsior Springs, Missouri, about 30 miles north of Kansas City. Sheriff's deputies believe he was fatally attacked by two dogs at the residence. Police say the dogs, a German Shepherd and what appeared to be a Mastiff, made a move toward them, and the animals were shot and killed.
The KMOX forecast, sponsored by Jerry Kelly Heating and Air Conditioning. Look for frequent rain throughout the midday. Watch for flooding on streets and sidewalks and areas of poor drainage due to the repeated downpours. We could see gusty thunderstorms, a high 65, rain and drizzle at times tonight, especially early on. And then it turns chillier, low around 45. Right now we have rain and 62 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel, KMOX News.
Hi, it's Debbie Monterey, and I see clearly thanks to Doctors Birdie and Malhotra. You can too. Go to youreye.com today or call 314-966-5000.
Driven by the Bommarito Automotive Group, the voice of St. Louis, KMOX.
The St. Louis Symphony Orchestra is checking in to the Bates Motel as Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho comes to the big screen at Powell Hall for an evening of spine-tingling and hair-raising terror. From the shrieking strings and the slashing chords, the SLSO performs Bernard Herrmann's suspenseful score live and intensifies this black and white psychological thriller. Join in on our costume contest or sip on a Halloween-themed cocktail before the concert on October 30th. Tickets at slso.org.
This is Debbie Monterey with a real estate update and some insight from my friend and trusted realtor, Gloria Liu, with Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Gloria told me that sitting on the sidelines may not be the best strategy moving forward in this continually shifting market. Homes aren't selling as quickly, and in most cases, price reductions are becoming pretty common. Gloria also said that earlier this year, with low inventory, sellers didn't need a strategy to sell homes because homes were listed and sold immediately. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a proven strategy to get your home sold, and that's why I strongly suggest you call local real estate expert Gloria Liu before you list your home to get the absolute most money. Gloria is so confident that she will sell your home, she'll guarantee in writing upfront to sell it at your agreed-to price and time frame, or she'll buy your home herself. Learn more by calling Gloria Liu at 314-325-6888, 314-325-6888, or online at gloriahasthebuyers.com.
Your home of the Cardinals.
Arenado swings and hits it deep to left field. That ball is out of here.
The Billikens.
Jumper. Yes! Billikens win!
The Chiefs.
Touchdown! Kansas City!
We are America's sports voice, KMOX.
The suspect, in addition to the rifle, brought in a large quantity of ammunition. He had 7 magazines of ammunition on a chest rig that he wore. He also had an additional 8 magazines of ammunition in a field bag that he had carried. This doesn't include the number of magazines that he left and dumped on the stairway in the corridors along the way. But it appears that he came into the building with more than 600 rounds of ammunition on his person.
That is Interim Chief Michael Sack at a press conference just a little bit ago at St. Louis Police Headquarters, describing what the shooter, Orlando Harris, brought with him to CVPA yesterday for that shooting. And there's just a lot, Ranj, there's a lot that we just heard in the press conference, and we won't be able to go over all of it. We will be checking in with Kevin Killeen in a little bit, who is or was there for sure during that, may still be there following up on things. But when he's free, we'll bring Kevin Killeen in to get a little bit more. But we found out more about the type of rifle. It was an AR-15 style rifle. We found out about the amount of ammunition. So clearly the intent here was a significant amount of damage.
Well, I don't think you go into 600 plus rounds of ammunition is what you have if you're in battle. So you're expecting to do serious damage. And we've heard about, and I don't know if we've talked about this today, but they did mention during the press conference the proximity of some of the police officers who were already very close in the area because of a funeral. And they were able to respond very quickly. Yeah. And if that had not happened, this would have been a whole lot worse. Yeah. It would have been a whole lot worse. And they did go after the shooter, as opposed to what we saw happen in Uvalde, which is a big reason that so much life was saved in this moment. But I can't, it's very difficult for me to reconcile the idea that this 19-year-old had that much weaponry on him.
That is going to be certainly a big part of the investigation now, is how that happened, whether or not laws were broken, and what the consequences for that will be. Because the questions were asked about this gun being bought from a private owner, as opposed to a licensed dealer. And I didn't hear who asked the question, but the answer was essentially, we're not going to comment on that because it's an ongoing investigation. But when asked a follow-up, Chief Sack said that there are, quote, loopholes that can allow for this kind of thing to happen even without a background check. And that's also, I mean, when we think of all the levels of correction that need to be made, if there are loopholes that allow someone in this mindset to get this kind of arsenal with this kind of weapon, those loopholes need to be closed.
Well, that seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Right.
Well, I mean, not even reasonable. It seems like the automatic thing to do, that we just do it, that we just, at very minimum, we close any loopholes. And I know that right now, the people investigating, and we have praised what St. Louis police did. They have been, they were very quick to respond, but you could tell there was a little bit of tension in the room, that people wanted more answers. And that press conference was ended pretty abruptly.
Yeah.
So hopefully we get those answers later.
Well, one of the people asking those questions was our own Kevin Killeen. In fact, Kevin, you asked the question about the shooter and how he gained entry. And I thought the exchange there, the information there was somewhat interesting, but did not enter through a checkpoint was part of that answer.
Hello?
We got you, Kevin.
Oh, okay. I was involved in a little huddle with the the local media is talking to the mayor's press person, who summarily cut the news conference short before a lot of questions were asked, and he's being told, don't do that. The chief got to be chief at this point, and he can handle some questions. But among the questions that were not really clear, you were talking about, Kevin, how did he get the gun? It was not clear whether he bought it from a local gun show. Channel 5 was asking the chief about reports that he tried to buy a gun at a gun show and was turned down. So where did he get the gun? One of the things that came out that was sad and very telling was that there was something of a journal in a notebook found. Did you talk about that yet? Where the shooter had left behind a journal entry? And
Yeah,
he said,
we
"I
know
don't
that.
have it."
We're going to play that audio in a few minutes, but yeah.
Yeah, and so it tells the mindset of someone who was a loner, and in his own description, self-description, says he was a perfect storm to do something like this. So I think in view of that, the chief opened this news conference saying, if you know anybody who it seems to be mentally distressed and is talking about lashing out in a shooting, talk about it right away. Get something done. So he's calling for, the public to be proactive. But then on another very important element of this, how the gun got in the school, there seems to be a disconnect from the St. Louis Public Schools Director of Public Safety, Andre Davis, about whether they're going to revisit the idea of arming their own security guards. Everybody's praising the police who got there in 4 minutes and took the guy out, but could the security team at the school have shot and killed him before he even and wounded an officer or wounded a student had they been armed? And Andre Davis is saying at this point they have not armed security guards because it would be upsetting for the children, to see the sight of a gun. So we were asking, what's more upsetting, what happened yesterday, or to see somebody walking down the hallway with a gun? So this is going to cause a big internal debate, and it's part of this whole, police reform umbrella that the society has been under lately. Are the police on our side, or are they the bad guys? Well, they were certainly the good guys yesterday, and sometimes people walking down the hallway with a gun, security guards, are part of a safe, civilized society.
Yeah, Kevin, and you mentioned not exactly clear how the shooter was able to acquire the gun, but you said it does seem he attempted to buy a gun at one place and was turned down. Was there any indication why he was turned down?
It had something to do with his mental state. I guess they thought he was not stable. Again, they were very brief. This was a news conference with not a lot of questions, and there's still, you'd be fascinated to hear, there's a little huddle over in the corner where the reporters for Channel 4 and 5 are haranguing the mayor's spokesperson for cutting the thing short after the police had such a good day yesterday, but they weren't allowed to give more details.
Yeah, so what was the explanation given as to why it was cut short? Because it was very noticeable how quickly and abruptly they ended everything.
There's no explanation that I've heard. It's just, it's been a general ethic. And maybe this comes out of some media workshop somewhere, run by people that washed out of journalism. that the way to run PR is to minimize your contact with the enemy, the reporters. Just make a few statements, take 2 questions, and run out the door. Where some of the most effective leaders and communicators in this town have been people who exhaust the reporters, and they stand there until the reporters give up and run out of questions. So I don't know where it's coming from, but that's sort of the little scuffle in the corner after this one. People would like to have had more questions answered about the shooting.
Yeah, we mentioned DeAndre Davis and some of the information he gave. Did he give some information he was not supposed to? Because he was cut off at one point.
Yeah, well, and that was when I was questioning him. Originally, on the ball field, on the track field yesterday, Chief Michael Sack said the gunman got in through a security checkpoint. And when I asked about that today, he said he did not get in through a checkpoint, and then he whispered something to Andre Davis, the director of security, and they just dropped it. They didn't make it clear where he entered. So maybe, yesterday the chief was sincerely telling me he got through a checkpoint, but maybe there's new information that they're not willing to share yet, or they're not completely certain about. But there's some sort of question about whether there was an opportunity for a school security guard, had he been armed, to stop this before it ever got started.
Well, and it seemed pretty clear today that those security guards were not armed. Why the confusion or ambiguity yesterday whether or not those security guards were armed?
I guess, the chief doesn't know the policy for every school and across the city. That's a good question. Why is he not aware of this? Because they certainly have to do mop up if they're helping police a school that doesn't have armed security guards.
Kevin, thanks so much. Great work there. Hopefully you'll continue to get some more answers, and we'll check in with you a little bit later on this afternoon.
All right. Thanks. Have a good show.
You got it. Kevin Killeen from police headquarters. Yeah, that was the ending of that was not good. It's one thing to answer. I mean, this is a big story. This is something that is gaining national news. And the questions were actually very basic. We were listening to them. Questions. We carried them here. There was nothing out of line about any of the questions. And not that there even really would be. There's nothing out of line. You should be able to ask
They're
questions.
Exactly the kind of questions anybody would be asking after an event like this.
And again, what was that the security guards were not armed because the optics of that could be upsetting, cause a stir was the phrase that we used. This line of reasoning we have heard before in the city of St. Louis. This was a line of reasoning when Charlie Brennan and I were talking, I think about a year ago, about the Metrolink and why the guards on the Metrolink should or should not be armed. And it was because it would be intimidating to riders. And to me, how is a security guard who is not armed going to stop someone who is? And again, as Kevin asked, it may be upsetting. What's more upsetting, having a security guard who is armed or a shooter?
Yeah.
This line of reasoning needs to be rethought.
A lot of things do in the wake of an event like this, and certainly they will continue to be. We have a couple of more audio clips from the press conference we want to play in a couple of minutes. A reminder, after the 12 o'clock news, we're going to have Dr. Randy Mosenter, who's a psychologist at WashU and Barnes Jewish Hospital, to talk a bit more extensively about people's recovery from this, the impact of the trauma, and how obviously there are a lot of different levels of this: the students, the teachers, parents of students, the law enforcement officers, a lot of different ways to look at that. We'll be doing that after the 12 o'clock news. When we come back, we're going to focus on 2 key bits of audio. One has to do with whether or not the shooter entered through a, quote, checkpoint, and the other are, they're the words of the shooter as read by Chief Sack. We'll get to those when we come back on the show.
Caring for residents for over a century, Manor Grove is committed to making everyone feel at home. Choosing a home for your loved one to reside is an important decision and shouldn't be taken lightly. Manor Grove makes your decision easy with medical professionals and staff who care for residents like family. If you are looking for a caring and quality nursing home and rehab facility, please visit our website, manorgrove.com, and take our virtual tour. Manor Grove, over a century of caring. Welcome home to Manor Grove.
Hi, this is Kent Newbold for Newbold BMW. We just celebrated our 35th year as a BMW dealer by finishing our multi-million-dollar renovation. So come see it. It's Newbold BMW in O'Fallon, Illinois, or newboldbmw.com. You'll be sold on Newbold.
Are you tired of paying fees and commissions year after year, even when you lose your money? How would you like to decrease fees and limit your risk? Join me, Ben Coons, for the Retirement and Income Radio Show, heard here every Saturday at 3 p.m. on KMOX Radio. You can also call me now for your complimentary retirement and income book at 844-513-SAFE. That's 844-513-7233.
If you owe the IRS, you have a legal issue, and you need the Lance Drury Law Firm. We'll protect your rights. Log on at lancedrurylaw.com.
Learn about the history and lessons of the Holocaust at the newly renovated St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum, reopening November 2nd. Membership and tickets for individual and group tours at stlholocaustmuseum.org.
Gas Appliance Service and the Fireplace and Grill Center have a huge selection of gas logs in stock to make your home warm and inviting. Don't get caught in the cold. Shop now for great prices, selection, and schedule your expert installation before long lead times of the holiday rush. See the beautiful burning displays at Gas Appliance Service near Westport or the Fireplace and Grill Center, a quarter-mile east of 141 on the south side of Manchester Road. Hurry while supplies last. Gas Appliance Service and the Fireplace and Grill Center.
Just recently, I had a customer call me. His mom was told that her furnace was compromised. Compromised, remember that. And so he called another company for a second opinion, and then he went further and he called me for a third opinion. I have to say, I give kudos and credit to that second company that came out there. They did a thorough diagnostic, which took an hour and 20 minutes, not 10 minutes. And they found the furnace was in perfect operating order per the manufacturer's specifications and guidelines. It's in your best interest to call and get a second opinion. If you want to call me for a second opinion, third opinion, fourth opinion, it's one easy number, Missouri and Illinois. It's 314-293-2600. It's Bart Inman, 314-293-2600, or Bart with a B, Inman with an I.com.
The show, sponsored by Straight Realty, your St. Louis area experts. Why pay more than 4? 314-441-4444. Kevin, Amy, and Chris now.
Best friends together.
Dave Glover at 2 on KMOX.
At that checkpoint where we got in, some of the students said the security guards only had nightsticks or flashlights. Are these security guards, were they armed with guns to stop this sort of thing from even starting?
So he did not enter a checkpoint.
Yeah, so let's not talk about
Okay.
Okay, we keep that.
Understood.
Yeah, thank you.
But
He did not enter a checkpoint.
the officers that are stationed in schools are not armed. The officers who respond to calls to schools are armed. We have about 25 officers that are armed with St. Louis Public Schools, but the ones that are stationed inside of buildings are not armed.
There you go. That was the question from Kevin Killeen a little bit ago, and the answer comes from DeAndre Davis. He's the Director of Safety and Security for the St. Louis Public School System. That part there where he said he did not come through a checkpoint got an immediate no. We're not going to talk about that.
Not a great moment.
Which again, it's out there. It's been said, and you can't unhear it. You can't pretend you didn't hear it. I understand why you may not want to put that thought in the head of someone else who might be thinking about shooting up a school, because you don't want to give them ideas about how to get around it. Because let's be honest, the fact that there were checkpoints with security guards probably limited how bad this was in some way, along with the critical response time and how fast police got there.
Well, let's think about this. If you are one of these people who, and I believe there are a lot of folks out there that have this mindset that, you can't limit whether or not a person can buy a firearm because a criminal is going to be a criminal. Criminal's going to figure out a way to do it. If you believe that mindset, then you also have to believe the mindset that just because a door is locked, if a guy wants to come into a building and do something, he's going to find a way to come into the building and do something. So I understand not wanting to give people ideas, but I'm not sure this kid needed any ideas. And I'm imagining that if he showed up with 600 plus rounds of ammunition, he was going to get in that building. Unless somebody stopped him first.
Well, unless you make
so I don't
buildings
think there's any
without windows.
Right. And yeah. So what are you going to do? Just board up all the windows, cover all the windows, put cement over them? I don't think you're going to do that. But if this guy was showing up with the intent to do damage, he was going to find a way in. So I understand the thinking, but I think it's misguided thinking. I don't think you're going to prevent or would have prevented this from happening, or I don't think you're going to encourage it to happen somewhere else if you tell us how he got into the building.
I'm a little surprised, or maybe I shouldn't be, by the reluctance to talk about this part of the
Me too.
of the event. I know in other catastrophic events like this, the school shootings, more of the details come out. What we do know, whether we're talking about the doors being locked, the security checkpoints, guns, laws on guns, any type of obstruction or impediment that you put in can save lives.
Right.
And those
You're
things
buying
do
time.
save lives.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
buying time. Also, if someone is, like this shooter was, mentally unstable, making it more difficult to get weapons, more difficult to get ammunition, it can stop them. It can delay them. It can buy time. It can help you see more warning signs. Because again, when someone is unstable like this, to whatever degree, an impediment could be as impenetrable as a wall at this point. Because again, they're opportunistic. They're acting on an impulse. Even if it's deliberate, you're buying time. So
Yes.
you can't, locked doors, all of these little things that you do. We know yesterday they saved lives, those steps.
Yeah, and you know how I feel about these things. I don't think the guy should have had a gun in the first place. I think it should be a lot more difficult to acquire all the stuff he acquired.
And
really, it should have been impossible for him especially, but it should be a lot tougher to get those things. But I believe in layers of protection.
Yes.
I believe in he shouldn't have had the weapons in the first place, but let's concede that guys like him, people like him are going to acquire weapons. Okay, so then what do? Well, then you have armed guards. You have armed guards at your checkpoints. If you're going to have checkpoints, you have people who are armed and can protect those checkpoints. Where I personally stop at arming teachers. I think it's a bad idea.
Mhm.
I don't think it would go well. But there can be layers of protection before it even gets to that point. And there was some protection, it sounds like, at the school. Maybe could have been a little bit better. There's still investigation that needs to happen here. But I don't really understand the elements of secrecy about that particular thing at this moment, because I don't know that it's necessary.
Yeah, I think bigger picture, I would agree with that. I think the only question is whether or not, because you're not finished with the investigation, you want to keep more things close to the vest. But I would agree, like long term, there's no reason that should be held. And I'm not sure of a reason now. I'm just saying if that's the reason, that's one thing. But long term, that shouldn't be an impediment, because if we don't acknowledge it, if we don't understand it, and if people don't know it, you are talking
Then
about,
how do you protect against it?
This is right. Exactly.
And I know we're still waiting for more details to come out about how exactly he was able to acquire the gun and 600 rounds of ammunition. When did he acquire the gun and 600 rounds of ammunition? Kevin mentioned that initially he was turned down from a gun purchase. Why? What is that reason? We believe it's because he seemed unstable. There are mental health issues. But was that a formal, record that they saw? Was it something that whoever he was buying the gun from didn't feel comfortable? We don't know any of those details yet.
That's definitely going to come out. I thought a caller to the Glover show yesterday made a point. I don't think the point was made particularly well, but he brought up ammunition as being a big part of this. Where did you get that much? Did you order it all at once? Did you spread it out? I mean, I think that's another answer that we have to figure out. We have to regulate that too. We have to be careful with that too. It should set off a red flag if someone's buying a lot of ammunition at one time.
You can't even buy a lot of Sudafed at one time.
No.
Maybe you
Sudafed
shouldn't be
is
allowed
more-
to get a
is
lot of
regulated,
this.
Right.
All right, coming up after the news, we're going to have Dr. Randy Mosenter from WashU and Barnes-Jewish to talk about the psychological aspect of this and recovery and treatment and counseling and all of that will follow an incident like this.
Hey guys, Glover here with my friends at ThriveNet. These are the genius IT guys that I've been representing for years and years now. We are number one all the time. Best in customer service from Small Business Monthly. Best in cybersecurity, again, Small Business Monthly. We have an average response time. I love this statistic. The average response time in St. Louis in 2020 by IT companies. You have a problem, you reach out to them, hey, I'm all shut down, help me, was 3 hours. If you got back within 3 hours, you were cool. Ours was 1 minute, 57 seconds, and the guys were very unhappy with that. It takes less than 2 minutes for us to address your problems. Here's a huge thing. We are now offering $500,000 in ransom protection to everyone who uses us. This is part of the deal. You don't pay extra for it. So if you happen to be hit and you have to pay, we're going to pay it up to $500,000. Now, this shows you how confident we are because no one under our protection has ever had to pay. Go to throttlenet.com/DGS.
Experience one of the biggest films in motion picture history with director Steven Spielberg's ultimate thrill ride. Jurassic Park, screened in HD on Powell Hall's giant screen, with John Williams' iconic score performed live to picture by your St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, November 4th through 6th. Tickets at slso.org.
Don't fall behind on your garage door maintenance. Call Overhead Door Company of St. Louis for our 26-point tune-up. It's only $89.95. That's one price for up to 3 garage doors and openers. Always look for the genuine, the original red ribbon of Overhead Door Company of St. Louis. Trusted by St. Louis homeowners since 1926. Schedule online at overheaddoorsstlouis.com or call 314-781-5200.
KMOX, KECK HD2, K254CR, St. Louis.
The home of the Cardinals, KMOX. Always live on the free Odyssey app.
It's easy to think all money managers are pretty much the same, but at Fisher Investments, we're clearly different.
Different? How? You sell high commission investment products, right?
No, Fisher Investments doesn't sell any commission-based investment products.
Well, you must earn commissions on trades.
Nope, never at Fisher. We're a fiduciary, obligated to act in our client's best interest. It's the highest standard of care for a financial advisor.
How do you know what's in their best interest?
We get to know our clients and then tailor a portfolio based on their goals and needs.
But you probably sneak in some hidden and layered fees.
No, we have one transparent management fee, structured so we do better when our clients do better.
Wow, you really do look out for your clients.
That's because our top priority is helping them achieve a comfortable retirement. It might be why most of our clients come from other money managers. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you switch to us. Fisher Investments. Clearly different money management.
Investments and securities involve the risk of loss.
Mid-America's most trusted source for news. KMOX.
At 12 o'clock, we have rain falling in the St. Louis region. Right now, we are looking at some heavy rain in the area and 59 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel. St. Louis police filling in a few more blanks about the shooter in yesterday's deadly school shooting. KMOX's Kevin Killeen attended a news conference heard live here on KMOX. He joins us now with more.
Carol, the chief, Mike Sachs, says that the shooter left behind a notebook giving us a glimpse into his state of mind, that he wrote in this notebook, I don't have any friends. I've never had a girlfriend. I don't have a social life. I am a loner. And the notebook went on to say the perfect storm for a school shooting. Chief Sachs says this shows why if you know someone who is talking about mental distress and they're talking even jokingly about doing a shoot up, that's the kind of person you need to report to the police. Carol?
Thank you, Kevin. And we will continue to follow this story on KMOX. The American Federation of Teachers St. Louis president issuing a statement after yesterday's school shooting.
Ray Cummings says their prayers and concern are with the students and families, and they mourn the loss of their member. But Cummings continues, while our schools have managed to remain mostly safe spaces up until now, the reality is that the streets and communities of St. Louis have been plagued by senseless gun fatalities for too long. Missouri has some of the weakest gun laws in the country, and the tragedy is a reminder that we must do more to protect all Missourians and make our schools and our neighborhoods safe and welcoming. Maria Kina, KMOX News.
2 students at Belleville East arrested this morning for allegedly bringing a gun and ammunition to school. The unloaded gun was discovered after a parent alerted a school resource officer and Belleville police of a social media post showing a student handling the weapon before class. The Belleville News Democrat reports police were notified at 9:01 this morning. Parents did get an automated call alerting them that a student was discovered to be in possession of an unloaded firearm on campus. And a Hazelwood West student is in custody after allegedly having a gun in his possession. Hazelwood police say they were conducting a follow-up investigation at the school when they were notified a student had a gun. Police say extra security measures are in place for the remainder of the day to ensure the safety of the students and staff. In other news, Adidas has announced it is cutting all ties with Kanye West over his repeated anti-Semitic comments. KCBS reporter Matt Bigler says Jewish politicians in California are calling on other companies to do the same.
Kanye felt perfectly comfortable just saying that he wanted to start killing Jews.
California State Senator Scott Wiener, who is Jewish, is calling on all organizations that have relationships with Kanye West to end them immediately.
Anyone who uses this kind of language, threatening to kill people because of who they are, needs to be ostracized.
Adidas says it does not tolerate anti-Semitism or any sort of hate speech. Teresa Drenick with the Anti-Defamation League says hateful comments from celebrities like Kanye have a real-world impact.
Just fanning the flames of anti-Semitism.
Matt Bigler for CBS News, San Francisco.
From the First Mid-Bank and Trust Business Desk, get ready to pay more for your Apple streaming services.
It's $1 more a month for an individual subscription of Apple Music. Apple TV Plus and Apple One will now cost $2 more per month. Family subscription plans will also see a jump in price. Apple says the price hikes are due to an increase in licensing costs.
It is not just Apple getting more expensive, as she said. Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus, and Netflix all recently got more expensive. The Dow is up 216 points.
Watch out for some big puddles on the highways as the rain continues. A couple of spot thunderstorms, some heavy downpours of rain at times. Windy, we're now primarily in the 50s the rest of the afternoon. Tonight, the rain ends, but not until late tonight. It's colder, though, overnight, 42. Wednesday, sunny skies, but it's windy and chilly, 62. Clear skies and 37 Wednesday night. Thursday, sunny and 62. Still expecting about a 1 to 2 inch rainfall out of this thing. The soil will handle it. The rivers will handle it. But again, there'll be some big puddles on the highways. I'm meteorologist Dave Murray for the Voice of St. Louis, KMOX.
Rain in the region, 50 degrees in St. Peters, 54 in Florissant. It is 59 downtown at the Arch. The news is sponsored by Michael's Flooring Outlet, the flooring experts, michaelsflooringoutlet.com. I'm Carol Daniel, KMOX News.
The show, sponsored by Straight Realty, your St. Louis area experts. Why pay more than 4? 314-441-4444.
It's 12:05 on the show. Chris Ranji, Amy Marks Kors, Kevin Wheeler with you here. Obviously following up on yesterday's shooting at CVPA. We had the police press conference a little bit ago. We will follow up on that a little later on in the show. At 12:30, we're going to talk to Representative Lakeisha Bosley, who was a student of Gene Kushka's back in, I believe it was junior high. So it would be great to get the personal story there about her former teacher. We're going to talk to Jay Greenberg from the FBI, special agent in charge here in the St. Louis field office, about their cooperation with this. The importance of understanding these situations, and also some of the copycat threats. There have been threats all around the area at different schools and school systems. So we'll follow up on all of those things with Jay Greenberg from the FBI a little bit later on as well. Right now, we're going back to the trauma side of this, and thankfully we can reach out to Dr. Randy Mosenter, the psychologist from Washington University and Barnes Jewish Hospital, to help us sort through this. And obviously, Dr. Mosenter, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. It's obviously a difficult time to sort through all the levels of trauma and struggle that people are going to go through in the aftermath of this. How should people go about assessing themselves or assessing their family members following something like this?
Well, I think after something like this, the expectations for how people are need to be that people aren't going to be okay. That, and understanding what okay means. I've already heard a lot of people talking about the fairness issue. It's not fair. This shouldn't happen. We shouldn't have to live in this kind of a world. And for teenagers especially, I think, knowing that random acts of horrific violence can happen and none of us are really safe is a horrible thing to realize and to live with. We may know it theoretically, but when it hits close to home, that's a whole different story.
Unfortunately, we have seen far too many school shootings, and it goes back to Columbine. Is there more data, or do we have more knowledge of what the kids who survived these school shootings may have to deal with or struggle with later on in life, if anything, because obviously this is such a traumatic experience?
So there are a lot of individual differences. One of the things that's very common is survivor's guilt. Why am I alive when my best friend is not? How come my life was spared? What do I need to do to make my life matter extra because I'm still here? I think the openness in talking about it, the understanding that, seeing a therapist doesn't mean that you're sick or that you're not okay or that there's something horribly wrong with you. I think the access, first of all, mental health is health. And I think that we still have a lot of stigma in this country and people don't fully understand that fact. After a trauma, a lot of the health concerns are physical health. Our survival instinct kind of goes onto overdrive. And so we tend to perceive threats where in the past we wouldn't have. Our adrenaline is up just as a baseline. And all of those things are physical things that can affect everything from how we feel to how we think to what we expect and to how we can cope. And that's huge. I think the stigma of mental health will not go away until we accept, again, mental health is physical health, and that talking to people, talking to therapists, talking to your physician, talking to a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a nurse practitioner, your counselor at school, your clergyman, whoever it might be, is not a maybe I should. It needs to be, of course I'm going to do this. Of course I just lived through this. Of course that's a healthy, normal thing to do. And we do know that people who do get counseling, get some therapy, deal with what happens, tend to do much, much better over the long run.
And just as a quick follow-up to that, to encourage people to seek help, counseling or a therapist. One of my favorite athletes said, if you pull a muscle or you're a little tight or you have a hard workout, you go to the trainer and there's no stigma to that. It's expected. It's considered good practice. And your brain is no different. Your brain should be treated the same way that you pulled a muscle or you need to see a chiropractor or get some help. And that is how we should view it. In the same way that an athlete takes care of a leg or an arm, you should also take care of your brain.
Absolutely. And I'll go one step even further, that you don't have to have an injury to do better. So, for example, I see a lot of athletes and performers and all kinds of competitive people that come to therapy not because they're doing poorly, not because they have their pulled brain muscle, for example, but because they want to learn to manage even better than they can. And that makes a huge difference in terms of long-term functioning. There's a whole field now of life coaching. What is that? I mean, some of us have been doing, life coaching as psychologists our whole career, because it's not just about, I have to be sick. There's something terribly wrong with me in order to want to do better, want to do more, want to manage better. And when we're anxious and tense and scared and all of those things, that impacts every organ in the body, every kind of functioning in the body, from our brain to our muscles, to our immune system, to our sleep, to everything else. And, good health is managing all of those things, not just waiting until, we're really barely functioning.
I don't know if this doctor is exactly in your purview, but I'm thinking about the other side of this, because mental illness is going to be the thing that people blame for what happened here. Mental illness on the part of the shooter. So, I mean, there are a number of different layers to this. One, I know we can't stigmatize mental illness, but also, what should we be looking out for realistically? If, they told us at the press conference today, if you see something, say something. So what should we be looking for?
I mean, I think that's a very broad, long category, because I think that long before someone perhaps qualifies for a mental health diagnosis, we all can look around our elementary schools and see the kid that feels isolated and lonely and bullied or anxious, and reaching out early and making sure that this kiddo is feeling okay, is getting their needs met, doesn't feel isolated and ostracized is really important. I think, lots and lots and lots of people have mental health diagnoses. A very, very, very minute fraction of them, do something horrifically tragic, like shooting up a school. Clearly, we have not done a good job, nor do I expect we will, in terms of identifying people at risk who shouldn't be able to get guns very easily. So mental health problems are gun problems as well, because you can't figure out, who's safe to have an automatic weapon, for example, and who's not. If there are adults who are putting things, or young adults, teenagers, adolescents, even children, putting things on social media, fantasizing about violence, talking about firearms, or, feeling ostracized or isolated, or, having been treated badly, that's definitely a warning sign. That's definitely a conversation that needs to be had to make sure this person is really doing okay, and offered, some help and support. I think we all think, the person's going to say no. But surprisingly, when it's offered, a lot more people than one would think say yes.
Sticking with the kind of the 10,000-foot view, and again, Dr. Randy Mosenter is with us from WashU and Barnes Jewish Hospital. You mentioned earlier the assumption, especially for people that directly are involved, students, teachers, friends of people that were victims, a lot of people that were directly involved in a shooting like yesterday, we should assume that they're not okay. We should assume, or they should also assume that themselves. How about just students in the broad sense who see these things and may not be okay themselves? I've had a friend, or actually a couple of different friends, mention students that are in different school districts, different parts of the country even, seeing these things and raising questions on their own.
Absolutely. Right. Because when something happens, it doesn't have to be in our own community. If you're a high school student and you see this happening across the country, it brings it close to home. This could happen in my school. And I think having these conversations and really talking about the impact that it has on everyone that has any empathy is important. I think defining okay is really important too. What does it mean to be not okay? I'm not sure there's anybody right now that is totally okay with what happened. It's horrific. And everyone who has a child or was a child or knows a child is going to stop and say, wow, what a horrible thing. This could have happened to me. This could happen to my child, my friend, my neighbor. This can happen. We live in a world where, unfortunately, these things happen, and it affects all of us.
Mm-hmm. You know, I had a friend who lost a sibling, and it was very, very difficult for him. And he dealt with it by not dealing with it, by keeping busy constantly. And at the time, I think he thought that was healthy because he thought,
Absolutely.
oh, I'm not wallowing in it. But years later, it has manifested itself in different ways. I imagine you've seen that sometimes people deal with it by not dealing with it.
Absolutely. And that's a pretty common thing. And you said something that was really important, which is that he didn't think that he wasn't dealing with it.
Right.
He thought that he was. And the reality is that a lot of times we cope in certain ways, really thinking that it's healthy and effective. And it may be for that period of time, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be across a lifetime. And sometimes something will happen. There's a cue, there's another incident, or, if you have a sibling that died from cancer, for example, and you think you've dealt with it and you've done really well, and then 20 years later, your neighbor's child gets sick. That may be enough to throw you right back into all the things that you didn't deal with. So it's not a matter of saying, oh, the person didn't deal with it well, or they should have done this, or they should have done that. I think it's the recognition that difficult things that happen in our lives don't get dealt with and go away forever necessarily.
Dr. Mazenter, thank you so much for all of the information. We really appreciate you coming on with us today. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for all you do.
You got it. That's Dr. Randy Mazenter. She is psychologist, clinical psychologist at WashU and at Barnes Jewish Hospital. And obviously a lot of resources out there for those that are seeking help. You'll find some at KMOX.com, and you can certainly find them by checking out the city's office, the St. Louis Public Schools. There's all kinds of information out there. So many places. Just make sure that you look if you think you might need some help. All right, reminder coming up in just a little bit. We're going to catch up with State Representative Lakeisha Bosley, who was a student of Gene Kushka's, and we'll do that just after the 12:30 news.
For everything online, it's Odyssey.com. Download the Odyssey app and listen to KMOX for all the news, sports, talk, and podcasts that move you. Odyssey, that's AUDACY.
Tom Ackerman sees clearly thanks to Doctors Birdie and Mahotra. You can too. Go to youridoc.com today or call 314-966-5000.
Men, if you're struggling with erectile dysfunction or PE and frustrated taking pills that don't work, Paramount Men's Medical Center offers breakthrough medical treatments that effectively treat your problem. 98% of patients experience immediate results during their first office visit. And for a limited time, your initial consultation and first treatment are completely free. Listen to a specialist in men's health.
I'm Dr. Brown. The physicians at Paramount Men's Medical Center offer the most advanced treatments that eliminate ED and PE. Now men are lasting 30, 60, 90 minutes or longer, regardless of age or medical history.
Guys, to eliminate your frustration in the bedroom, call Paramount Men's Medical Center now to take advantage of this exclusive limited-time offer. Your initial consultation and first treatment are totally free, and you'll see instant results right in the office. Call now, 314-720-8081. 314-720-8081. That's 314-720-8081.
Hey there, it's Hancock and Kelly for First Mid-Bank and Trust, a local bank right here in St. Louis with over 157 years of experience and 19 locations across the greater St. Louis area.
Yeah, First Mid-Bank and Trust is perfect for small business owners. You need a partner that you can count on, and that is First Mid-Bank and Trust, and they're great for everybody, whether you're saving for your first home, paying off debt, or planning for retirement. Check them out online, firstmid.com. You'll be glad you did.
KMOX with the St. Louis Odyssey stations will once again partner with you to raise funds for SSM Health Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital through the Tree of Hope program. With your help and the help of our sponsors, we have raised over $170,000 over the past 2 years. If you own a business and would be interested in donating or partnering with us on this year's campaign, please sign up at KMOX.com/Cardinal Glennon or text HOPE to 20357.
If you own a house in St. Louis and you want to sell it as is, without any inspections or the need to make any repairs, call Chris Buys Homes St. Louis at 314-328-8000 or at chrisbuyshomes.stlouis.com and get your cash offer without any obligations, commissions, banks, or headaches. Chris buys vacant houses, inherited houses, fixer-uppers, beautiful houses, even the tenant won't pay the rent apartment. Google Chris Buys Homes in St. Louis. That's Chris Buys Homes in St. Louis, and check out the best reviews from satisfied customers. When you sell to Chris, you decide when you want to move, according to your schedule and your terms. Go to chrisbuyshomesinstlouis.com. Google Chris Buys Homes in St. Louis or call 314-328-8000. That's 314-328-8000. Call Chris and get the offer you've been waiting for. Chris Buys Homes in St. That's Chris Buys Homes in St. or call 314-328-8000.
All the news and all that matters to you. The voice of St. Louis, KMOX.
All right, so the show on KMOX, Chris Ranji, Amy Mark Scores, Kevin Wheeler with you here. Again, just a reminder, we'll have State Rep Lakeisha Bosley with us coming up in the next segment. She had Gene Kushka as a teacher in middle school, and we'll be kind of going through some stories there. That's going to be coming up here after the 12:30 news. At 1 o'clock, Jay Greenberg is special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office of the FBI. Going to get his input. The FBI is involved in this investigation, so I'm sure to that degree they're not going to be able to give too much detail, but they can talk in general terms about the FBI's involvement in these types of things. I do think we want to raise, don't you guys think, the investigations into some of the copycats? They're not really copycats because they haven't gone through with it, but there have been threats posted in multiple schools, multiple school districts that are being investigated. Some of them led to schools being closed. Others obviously continued business as usual. And I've seen it. I'm not going to get into any of the details or mention which school, but a friend of mine sent me a screenshot of the threats that were posted from a student using his own profile. So I mean, I didn't see that part. I didn't see the profile or the name of the kid, but it was essentially, this is no joke. It's not a threat. It's a promise, that kind of thing, and pictures of guns and things along those lines. And I want to get into like that element that follows this, and then how seriously it's treated, because you have to take everything seriously. You can't say, they're just venting or trying to scare people, because these things are happening so frequently. You have to take it as a threat.
Well, the reality is it's very unlikely they're being serious, but you can't treat it like it's unlikely.
Right.
You have to treat it as if it is a significant threat in the moment, because if it turns out to be that, that 0.5% chance, or maybe it's even less than that, that it is somebody who's serious, then you can't be on the wrong end of that. And you have to make sure it doesn't happen. Yeah. So, but the truth is, there are going to be a lot of kids who are idiots. And when something like this happens, they think, oh, but this is going to be funny. I'm going to do this. Or could be somebody who just wants attention for whatever reason, because they have a lot of things going on in their lives. But you have to be on top of all this. So I don't blame schools yesterday for canceling. I don't blame them at all for canceling after school events. And I guess a lot of schools just went on lockdown. They couldn't really cancel because they were already in class at the time. Some schools cleared out but went right back in. You do not blame any administrator or the public school system for being overly cautious when something like this happens.
Yeah, it just, you see, I think we've seen this theme over the course of, well, especially the past couple of years, how unhealthy isolation is on various levels. Obviously, this is the most extreme level. This is the worst possible outcome, is that this shooter did what he did. That is a huge concern with kids who tend to be that isolated, that loner. And again, there's that weird fascination with other shooters. That's a very dangerous trend that we see. And isolation is so unhealthy. Isolation is unhealthy if you are someone who's moving away from the shooter. Isolation is unhealthy if you're someone who's grieving. We saw that with COVID and the shutdowns. Isolation is unhealthy if you have a history of depression or addiction. We have to be here to help one another. It is not good to be isolated, to be disconnected. And we just talked to Dr. Mosenter talking about mental health and reaching out. And I actually just saw a story of a girl who dealt with depression. And she was she felt it so deeply that she would have trouble showering at times. And there was a hairstylist who knew this and who lived near her and made a standing appointment, and she would wash her hair like every Tuesday. And this is the only thing that kept this girl going through that depression, was that there was a hairstylist who free of charge said, I need you to come in so I can wash your hair. And she said, okay. And she would come in even though she was dealing with depression. And she sent a note to thank that hairstylist for reaching out. And she said, sometimes it's not, asking if you need help. It's, I'm going to help you. I'm just going to offer and give you something now.
That's why they tell you when somebody's going through something, not to say, hey, if you need anything, let me know. Just say, what can I do for you right now?
Or I'm bringing over cookies. What else can I pick up? Yeah.
Just don't wait for them to ask you.
Great way to put all of that. Coming up next, Lakeisha Bosley is going to join us, state representative from District 79. Her former teacher, Jean Kushka, was killed in the shooting yesterday, along with Alexandria Bell. We're going to get some stories. I think we want to know the person that was lost yesterday. We'll do that when we come back on KMOX.
Weeknights at 6. It's the Meyer Jensen Sports Open Line.
Welcome into the program. My name is Matt Pauley.
Matt gets you inside the world of sports. Cardinals, Chiefs, Pelicans. You'll get it all and much more.
We have an exclusive podcast that's Cardinals related called Cardscast.
Plus great guests, insight, and conversations with you.
If you want to join us, you can do so by calling or texting
the Meyer Jensen Sports Open Line on America's Sports Voice, KMOX.
It's easy to think all money managers are pretty much the same, but at Fisher Investments, we're clearly different.
Different? How? You sell high commission investment products, right?
No, Fisher Investments doesn't sell any commission-based investment products.
Well, you must earn commissions on trades.
Nope, never at Fisher. We're a fiduciary, obligated to act in our client's best interest. It's the highest standard of care for a financial advisor.
How do you know what's in their best interest?
We get to know our clients and then tailor a portfolio based on their goals and needs.
But you probably sneak in some hidden and layered fees.
No, we have one transparent management fee structured so we do better when our clients do better.
Wow, you really do look out for your clients.
That's because our top priority is helping them achieve a comfortable retirement. It might be why most of our clients come from other money managers. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you switch to us. Fisher Investments. Clearly different money management.
Investments and securities involve the risk of loss.
At 12:30, we have rain and 59 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel. New information today about the weapon used in the shooting, one rifle, an AR-15 style, according to acting St. Louis Police Chief Michael Sack.
He had 7 magazines of ammunition on a chest rig that he wore. He also had an additional 8 magazines of ammunition in a field bag that he had carried.
Sack went on to say this did not include the number of magazines he dumped on the stairway along the way. In other news, University of Florida going to start enforcing a decades-old prohibition against indoor protests following a raucous demonstration earlier this month against the selection of U.S. Senator Ben Sasse as a finalist for the school president's job. The NBA and its players have announced a plan to encourage better and more respectful behavior within basketball, even at youth levels, part of the league's Respect for the Game initiative, a term used with players for nearly 2 decades. Ash Carter, the Obama administration defense secretary who opened military combat jobs to women, has died at the age of 68. His family says he died after suffering a heart attack on Monday. There's an accident 170 southbound at Airport Road. The left lane is blocked in that location. The KMOX forecast for this afternoon, look for frequent downpours, gusty thunderstorms possible. We could see flooding on streets and sidewalks in those areas that don't drain properly. Look for a high this afternoon of 65 degrees. For tonight, rain and drizzle at times, especially early on. Then chillier, the low 45. Sunshine tomorrow will be a cool day. Wednesday's high 61. Right now, heavy rain and 57 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel, KMOX News.
Driven by the Bomarito Automotive Group, the voice of St. Louis, KMOX.
Is your bank, brokerage, or your insurance company telling you to buy an annuity? They may have limited access to the best rates available. You need solutions, not someone pitching you a specific product. Call for your complimentary retirement and income book at 844-513-SAFE. That's 844-513-7233. And also join me, Ben Coons, for the Retirement and Income Radio Show, heard here every Saturday at 3 p.m. on KMOX Radio.
Your home of the Cardinals.
Arenado swings and hits it deep to left field. That ball is out of here.
The Billikens.
Jumper. Yes! Billikens win!
The Chiefs.
Touchdown! Kansas City!
We are America's sports voice, KMOX.
We continue on KMOX. Chris Ranji, Amy Marks, Scores, Kevin Wheeler with you here. Lots going on in the wake of yesterday's shooting, and we're trying to look at this from so many different ways. But I think we also want to make sure that aside from talking about police and laws and the psychology, all of these things that are really important and really matter, the individuals lost matter. Alexandria Bell was 15 years old. She matters. Gene Kushka, 61-year-old teacher, matters and mattered to a lot of people over the years, not just with her family, but others as well. And we're happy to have one of those folks, a former student of hers, joining us on KMOX. Representative Lakeisha Bosley is the representative from the 79th District here in the state of Missouri in the St. Louis area. And Lakeisha, thank you first for joining us. We appreciate it. I know it's a tough time for a lot of people. This is a horrific story, but we did want to take a little time to learn a bit more about Gene Kushka. And of course, she was a teacher of yours.
Yes, she was my teacher. Miss Jean was, she was something else, to say the least. She didn't take any stuff. And I appreciated that about her. And I share that story often. And, she was my middle school health teacher. And we were always so how Carlene is set up, the younger kids, 6th grade, we have to climb those stairs. And then 7th grade, we come to the 2nd floor, and she was our health teacher, and she was always, smiling, but, she didn't take any stuff from anybody, and I loved her for it.
We were, that when something like this happens, obviously you want to get to know more about her, and we knew she was close to retirement. But we also knew, just from hearing from her daughter, that she loved her job, obviously. I mean, this is the kind of thing, and I think most people who get into teaching love their jobs. Some of them do it for a job, but most people, they really care. Was it the kind of thing that you can't always tell with your teachers if they care, but I would imagine you could tell with her?
Yes, you can absolutely tell that she cared, because she showed up even in the most frustrating days, even with having a spirited, mouthy student like myself. she showed up, and she never made, and I can speak for me, and I know some of my classmates because we still talk. She never made us feel unwanted or unhappy in being there. She always made it such a positive experience, even when she was getting in our butts about something that, we absolutely should not have been doing. And just, being a light for us. One of my classmates, who's my best friend, she was her teacher when she went to Central. And so she left Carlene and went to Central. And she showed up for my friend outside of the building. She had her first poetry book that she had ever written in her life published, and it was her first milestone. And Miss Kushka came. She showed up, And she was there. And that is the type of teacher, the type of person, the type of human she was. And it's hard to say was. I want to say is so bad. And I have to constantly remind myself that it's was now. And for her to step in front of a dangerous person at the time with just instinct, immediate, that's who she is. That's who she was. That's who she will always be for us, her former and current students. And I just want to thank her family for sharing her with us for all of these years. You know, she could have went to Kirkwood School District. She could have went anywhere, but she stayed with SOPS. She stayed here because she loved us, and we appreciate her. And I just want to thank her family for sharing her with us for all of these years. We greatly appreciate you, and we appreciate her.
Really, really beautifully said. And as you mentioned, that she was there for your friend when her first book of poetry was written, and I saw that you posted on Twitter about her being your teacher and how you remember her in health class in middle school. And I was struck. I mean, here is a state representative, a leader in the community, in the state, in our country, and you think of how many lives our teachers affect, and all the kids, all the students that Jean Kuchka was able to encourage or influence and teach. And then they go on, like you, to be leaders in our country.
Yep. And you know, she had a hand in molding that, you know, in making me feel comfortable and free enough to know that I had a voice. And she never tried to diminish that voice. As I say, you know, I was a mouthy kid. Like, it was a lot to deal with. And she dealt with it, but she dealt with it so delicately and with such grace. And I appreciate her so much for it. Even though, you know, people are like, oh, she was just a health teacher. All of my teachers shaped me in so many ways. And for her to have had the hand in, you know, in doing that, like I said, with such grace, it's important for us to remember that, you know, we're talking about generations of students, of scholars, who are the next leaders of this free world that we love to live in. And the impact of being there with those teachers, like, we're there with them on hours, on days, you know, they get to see us at our best and our worst. We are family, essentially. And, you know, she definitely made Carlane feel like home, even in the most frustrating of times. I appreciate her and all of the teachers out there. You know, we could talk about the nuance of why we're not paying them enough. And this is an example of how incredible our teachers are and how we should be showing up for them. She deserves the same heroic welcoming and homegoing service as any other hero that we can think of, because she put herself out there in the line of fire. And I greatly appreciate her for it. She saved so many lives. Many lives.
It's so terrible to have to hear it in this way, but it's a great story to hear, Lakeisha, because, you know, most of us, I think, can think of a teacher or two or three over the time, you know, whether it's middle school, grade school, high school, whatever, that had some kind of impact. But then when you hear, you know, somebody else tell the stories, it starts to ring true. There are just so many of those teachers out there. And look, no profession's perfect, but far more often we're hearing stories like this than the other.
Yeah, you know, and I think that's the important piece. Like, we have to understand, like, our teachers are shaping our mindset. They're shaping the next generation. They're shaping the future leaders, CEOs. They're literally shaping the world, and we've got to give them as much credit as possible. And showing up for them in all of the ways is important. And when I say all of the ways, it's not just monetary, but congratulating them and kudos to them and taking our hats off to them for doing such a thankless job sometimes. And Miss Klushka, she showed up for us no matter what. She was there, and she was there with a smile. She, even when she may have been frustrated about something, she never took it out on her students. She always came in with positivity. But she, like I said, she didn't take no stuff. So if you could give it, you better know that you were going to get it back. And that is so powerful to have, and like I said, she did it with such grace. And we just got to show up for our teachers. And this is another example of why we have to show up for them, because they are facing unimaginable, like, I can't even fathom, and I know many can't even fathom, like, are we really talking about this as something that has happened in St. Louis in our schools? And it is, we shouldn't be having this conversation, but we just shouldn't be having this conversation.
What do you think can be done to better help them?
Well, first and foremost, we need to make sure that our teachers are safe, our scholars are safe. And the one way that I can think of that, if, my Republican colleagues don't want to attack the gun, then attack the bullet. Ammunition is, a gun is rendered useless without ammunition. So if we can find a way in Missouri to change our ammunition laws, making it taxable at the point of sale, they have to have a paper trail, then I think we will start to see it change the narrative a bit, because you're making it harder for ammunition to get out here in the streets. Guns are a part of the problem, but if they're not going to attack the gun, attack the ammo. Making sure that we have mental health counselors in our schools. I congratulate, thank you to Hopewell and BHR for stepping up to the plate, and our Congresswoman and everyone, Urban League, all of our community partners were stepping up to the plate to try to help with the mental health crisis that this will come to, and for generations upon generations. But we have to show up for our teachers, not just paying them more, but making sure that they know that they are essential workers, that they are an essential career. And we do that in multiple ways. But the only way that I can think of is raise their pay. First and foremost, pay them a livable wage, but also make sure that we are attacking the problem, which is not just mental health, but also ammunition.
And then going back to Jean, you said she did not take any stuff from you. Do you have a particular moment that you're thinking of when she really refused to take anything from you?
I could think of a few of them, but I just know it was one particular day I was having a rough day, and I was just taking it out on anybody, and she kind of pulled me to the side, and she was like, "No, ma'am, we're not doing that today." And I was like, "Okay." She was like, I'm not going to send you to the principal's office. We're gonna handle this." And, she sat me there, and I didn't even have to talk. I just let it go. And that's the type of teacher she was. Like, if you didn't, she wasn't going to force you to talk, but like I said, she wasn't going to take any stuff from you either, but she wasn't the type of person to just discard you immediately. She would try to help you work through it. So I appreciate her for it.
And we appreciate you joining us and telling us these stories. Thank you so much for doing this. And by the way, also very sorry for your loss. I know we're sorry for her family and friends and all of the students that got to experience Jean Kushka over the years, but also sorry for your loss as well. And thank you for sharing the stories.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for humanizing her. It's important that people know that she is, and she's touched so many lives. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you so much. That's Representative Lakeisha Bosley from District 79 in St. Louis, in the Missouri House. I do think that's the important part, right, is at least a little bit getting to know the person, because the more personalized these things become, the more motivated people are to do something or to call your representative or what. I mean, like, you may not be able to solve a problem, but you can be heard. You can have a voice. You can call someone. You can try to do something. And if it, who knows, you run into walls, you run into obstacles, that's going to happen. but it doesn't happen. You won't run into those things if you don't make an effort.
I really like what Representative Bosley brought up about her teacher, Jean Kuchka, how she didn't take any stuff, but she also was delicate with the kids and the way that, okay, you're having a hard day, let's talk about this. She was still the teacher, was still an authority and didn't let the kids run over her, but was able to talk to them, talk with them through whatever difficult moment they were going through. That's a real skill. That's a real beautiful skill to have as a teacher. And I'm so glad that Representative Bosley was able to share that story.
I know I've had several of those teachers, and they were very much a helpful part of turning from a stupid kid into a person that was a little less dumb as you got older and could pay attention and get things back on the right track. Many thanks again to Lakeisha Bosley. Coming up after the news at 1 o'clock, we're going to have Special Agent in Charge, Jay Greenberg. He's in charge of the St. Louis field office. He's going to join us in studio, talk about their involvement to the degree that he can talk about it, and these other threats that we mentioned in other schools and school districts, and the importance of investigating these things to the fullest. We'll get to that after the news on the show.
Hey guys, Glover here with my friends at ThrottleNet. These are the genius IT guys that I've been representing for years and years now. We are number one all the time. Best in customer service from Small Business Monthly. Best in cybersecurity, again, Small Business Monthly. We have an average response time. I love this statistic. The average response time in St. Louis in 2020 by IT companies. You have a problem, you reach out to them, hey, I'm all shut down, help me, was 3 hours. If you got back within 3 hours, you were cool. Ours was 1 minute, 57 seconds, and the guys were very unhappy with that. It takes less than 2 minutes for us to address your problems. Here's a huge thing. We are now offering $500,000 in ransom protection to everyone who uses us. This is part of the deal. You don't pay extra for it. So if you happen to be hit and you have to pay, we're going to pay it up to $500,000. Now, this shows you how confident we are because no one under our protection has ever had to pay. Go to throttlenet.com/DGS.
Guys, Halloween's right around the corner, and October is pizza month, so you can celebrate the end of the month with some Brew Pub, lots of Matza Pizza, and have that available, whether it's grown-ups party, kids party. Obviously, everybody likes pizza, and the Brew Pub, lots of Matza Pizza gives you so many choices. You go to the grocery store, head to the freezer aisle, you got a bunch of options for you, the traditional ones, right? Cheese pizza, pepperoni, and sausage. Kids probably like to lean that way, but if you want to go a little bit more, the taco pizza, breakfast pizza, Hawaiian, if you're willing to go there, a lot of different choices. They're all fantastic. And on each one of those pizzas, you've got a half pound of award-winning mozzarella cheese. Now, you've got great toppings. And by the way, a lot of them as well, plentiful toppings. There's nothing worse than, open up a pizza and you're like, all right, this is supposed to be pepperoni. Where are the pepperonis? This is supposed to be a cheese pizza, and I can barely see the cheese. It's not covering all of the sauce. It's not covering all of the crust. You don't have that problem with the Brew Pub lots of Matza Pizzas. And if you go to KMOX.com/contest, you have a chance to win a year's supply of the Brew Pub lots of Matza Pizzas and a little pizza oven that fits on your counter as well. So again, that's KMOX.com/contest. But in the meantime, get out to the grocery store, head to the freezer aisle, and pick yourself up some Brew Pub lots of Matza Pizzas in time for Halloween.
Hello, this is Chad Clayman with ClaymanGroup.com, 314-946-9999, 946, all nines. If you just inherited a property and you're not sure what you're going to do with it and you want an as-is sale, please reach out to us today. Especially with probate cases, we do a lot of work with the probate courts and we're very familiar with the confusing process. So if you have a house that you want to sell fast, maybe something that you just inherited, please reach out. Phone number is 314-946, all nines, ClaymanGroup.com, KLAMEN, 946-9999.
Let's talk real estate for a minute. The St. Louis market is kind of tricky for home sellers right now, with home values going down and not selling as quickly. Now is not the time to risk losing precious equity on your home. This is Debbie Monterey, and I always recommend calling Gloria Liu with Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Gloria's the best. She's experienced every type of market, both good, great, and the not so good. So before you list your home for sale, call Gloria, and here's why. Gloria Liu will guarantee to sell your home at your agreed-to price and time frame, or she'll buy it herself, guaranteed in writing. Gloria already has the buyers, thousands of buyers in her database. In fact, your home may already be sold. Gary and Angela called Gloria and sold their home even before it listed because Gloria had several buyers looking for a home in that area. Call Gloria Lou today at 314-325-6888, 314-325-6888, or find her online at gloriahasthebuyers.com.
You're not just looking for a doctor, you're looking for a way to feel better. At Archwell Health, our team is devoted to improving the lives of seniors like you. Barbara was ready to try chair yoga for the first time. She took one of our classes and met friends along the way. James chatted with his doctor and the team dietitian and got to the bottom of his dizzy spells. Archwell Health members enjoy a community of comprehensive care because you are more than a patient. Join today at archwellhealth.com/livewell.
The show, sponsored by Straight Realty, your St. Louis area experts. Why pay more than four? 314-441-4444.
You know that new sound you're looking for? Well, listen to this.
The show on KMOX.
All right, Chris Ranji, Amy Marks, Scores, Kevin Wheeler with you here on the show. Coming up top of the hour, we're going to have Jay Greenberg from the FBI with us, special agent in charge at the St. Louis field office. And we'll get into their involvement in this, again, to the degree that he can talk about it. But they are asking for people's help. I don't know if you guys saw this on Twitter, but
Yes.
FBI St. Louis is asking for pictures, videos, anything from anyone that was at Central VPA yesterday that might be able to help them. Now, since that was posted, we know who the shooter is. We know that it was one person and not multiple people. We know, for example, that there's no continuing threat or anything like that. And we do have more details, including the letter that the shooter wrote that was found in his car and what he had with him. So I'm not sure. We'll ask Jay about that. I'm not sure if that's something that's still of great need. But the more that they can understand the movements of someone, for example, inside the building, the more you can understand responses and protections and things along those lines.
Just going back to something that Representative Lakeisha Bosley said, she brought up ammunition. This is something that we talked about after Uvalde, after Highland Park, is so many times these shooters have just an enormous amount of ammunition. They have round after, all of these rounds and these mags. And when you buy Sudafed, you can only buy so much. And there's a paper trail.
Yeah.
To me, it is such a logical step that if someone is buying multiple guns and a lot of ammunition, that at the very least, that should be a red flag of sorts. At the very least.
Very least. I feel
either
like
it's not allowed, or you have a paper trail, or it's a red flag, because that's not a normal action to buy that much ammunition. And again,
well, what we don't know though,
what does that look like?
Was it a single purchase?
Was it a single purchase?
Was it 20 different purchases, some in person, some online? Because if you're buying a couple of quote magazines, if you're buying a couple of boxes here and there, that's probably not going to raise anybody's alarms if you're doing that all over the place. But it doesn't mean that there can't be some mechanism in place if you're paying with the same credit card. But if you're paying with cash, what are you going to do?
I think time is like the amount of time that passed. That seems to be harder to track because, if it's every few months or something, that would be harder to mark as a red flag versus if you made 20 purchases from 20 different outlets.
Right.
Somehow there should be a database that
Well, is there a requirement to show ID to purchase it? Because if not, you go in hand in cash and you've got ammo.
Well, this was a private purchase. They didn't really go into detail about what exactly that means
or the how. Right.
Like who was the seller, the legality of it, whether there were loopholes that he got past or that he utilized in order to buy the weapon, and the ammunition. And we're going to find those things out. But I think it's like to a reasonable person, it's very clear that this should be a lot more difficult. Should just be a lot more difficult, and there should be a lot more restrictions on people being able to do that. Now, that's not saying take all of your weapons away. Everybody who has a gun has to turn it in. We're not saying that. We're just saying there are people who very clearly don't belong with them. By the way, I want to take this a step further. I know that we gave it out earlier, but I want to give it out again. And this is for anybody who's feeling crisis of any kind or suicidal in any way. There are phone numbers. There are people that you can reach out to. This is if you were in the school and you're traumatized, if you worked there or whatever. And also, if you feel like you might do something yourself, 314-469-6644 or dial 988 on your mobile.
Special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office in the FBI, Jay Greenberg, will join us when we return on the show.
Let's talk real estate for a minute. The St. Louis market is kind of tricky for home sellers right now, with home values going down and not selling as quickly. Now is not the time to risk losing precious equity on your home. This is Debbie Monterey, and I always recommend calling Gloria Liu with Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Gloria's the best. She's experienced every type of market, both good, great, and the not so good. So before you list your home for sale, call Gloria, and here's why. Gloria Liu will guarantee to sell your home at your agreed to price and time frame, or she'll buy it herself, guaranteed in writing. Gloria already has the buyers, thousands of buyers in her database. In fact, your home may already be sold. Gary and Angela called Gloria and sold their home even before it listed because Gloria had several buyers looking for a home in that area. Call Gloria Liu today at 314-325-6888, 314-325-6888, or find her online at gloriahasthebuyers.com.
If your business has 5 or more employees and managed to survive COVID, you could be eligible to receive a payroll tax rebate of up to $26,000 per employee. I'm Amy Mark Scores for Innovation Refunds. Now, this isn't a loan. There's no payback. It's a refund of your taxes. And if you're wondering, how do I get through the red tape and get my business the refund money? Go to getrefunds.com. The team of tax attorneys they've put together are highly trained in this little-known payroll tax refund program and have already returned $1 billion to businesses, and they can help you too. Businesses of all types can qualify, including those who took PPP, nonprofits, and even those that had an increase in sales. To find out if your business qualifies, just go to getrefunds.com, click on the Qualify Me, and answer a few questions. Don't miss out. Go to getrefunds.com, getrefunds.com.
KMOX, KECK HD2, K254CR St. Louis.
The legendary voice of St. Louis, KMOX. Always live on the free Odyssey app.
This is Corey from Air Comfort Service Heating and Cooling, here to tell you about an organization that is near to dear to our company and one we've been proud to sponsor, Greater St. Louis Honor Flight. Greater St. Louis Honor Flight flies World War II, Korea, and Vietnam War veterans to Washington, D.C. for free to see their memorials. Greater St. Louis Honor Flight is looking for you. If you know of a veteran, please sign them up for their honor flight. Or if you'd like to lend your support, visit gslhonorflight.org. And for all things heating and cooling, visit aircomfortservice.com. That's aircomfortservice.com.
Spark Co-working St. Louis is a new collaborative workspace located within the PwC Pennant Building in Ballpark Village. The Spark Co-working community supports the thriving St. Louis entrepreneurial ecosystem, where you can live, work, and watch the Cardinals play all within one district. The all-inclusive workspace includes furnished month-to-month offices and suites with stadiums, city, and arch views, concierge mail service, nitro cold brew coffee on tap, and so much more. Call 314-278-5297 or visit spark-stl.com.
Mid-America's most trusted source for news, KMOX.
At 1 o'clock, we have rain and 54 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel. Our top story this morning, we got an update on the evidence left behind by the school shooter. KMOX's Kevin Killeen joins us live from the newsroom.
And Carol, we are finding out more about the shooter. He was a 20-year-old former student from that school. They found a notebook in his car at the scene, and Police Chief Michael Sack quoted one telling line.
I don't have any friends. I don't have any family. I've never had a girlfriend. I've never had a social life. I've been an isolated loner my entire life. This was the perfect storm for a mass shooter.
Police say they also found, of course, the AR-15 style weapon used in this assault, 7 magazines of ammunition, and more than 600 rounds. Live in the newsroom, Kevin Killeen, KMOX News.
After the shooting, Alderwoman Pam Boyd put out a call for clergy. The first on the scene was Reverend Roderick Burton. He is senior pastor at New Northside Missionary Baptist Church.
Unfortunately, I've had 6 members murdered, so I had
some idea of what type of stresses people go through when they're dealing with that situation.
He said he knew people on the scene, including parents, would need support, encouragement, and prayer. 2 students at Belleville East have been arrested for allegedly bringing a gun and ammunition to school this morning. The unloaded gun was discovered after a parent alerted a school resource officer and Belleville police of a social media post showing a student handling the weapon before class. Parents did get an automated call alerting them that a student was discovered to be in possession of an unloaded firearm on campus. Police say the weapon was never displayed. A Hazelwood West student is in custody after allegedly having a gun in his possession. Hazelwood police say they were conducting a follow-up investigation at the school when they were notified a student had a gun. In other news, medical experts are sounding the alarm about a possible triple-demic that could unfold this winter, with cases of COVID-19, flu, and RSV all expected to rise.
The season is already off to a rough start, with respiratory illnesses spiking around the country. Experts are concerned about a possible triple-demic.
We have 3 respiratory viruses, RSV, influenza, and COVID, rising at the same time. Obviously, that's something we're going to monitor very closely.
Pediatric hospitals in many states are at capacity, with kids fighting respiratory infections. But White House COVID-19 response coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha says Americans are not powerless in this situation. Getting vaccinated can make a big difference.
CBS's Christian Benavides in Miami. A new honor for the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. CBS News correspondent Allison Keyes has that.
I am proud to be affiliated with the University of Buffalo.
That's the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in 2019, receiving one of her many honorary degrees. Now the liberal justice is being honored with a stamp. The USPS calls her an icon of American culture. The design of the forever stamp is a painted portrait based on a photo of Justice Ginsburg in a black robe with an intricate white collar. The stamp will be available for purchase next year. Allison Keyes, CBS News.
The First Mid-Bank and Trust Business Desk home prices fell again in August. Business reporter Jason Brooks runs the numbers.
S&P Case-Shiller reports that U.S. home prices fell 1.1% in August from July, while the year-over-year gain of 13% was well below the more than 15% annual gain in July, marking the biggest deceleration in prices in the history of the index. The biggest month-over-month declines occurred in the San Francisco Bay Area, Seattle, and San Diego.
The Dow from Stifel at this hour is up 242 points. There is an accident 70 East at Grand Avenue. Again, that is an accident. The left lane blocked 70 East at Grand Avenue. The KMOX forecast, look for this rain to continue off and on this afternoon. Could cause some flooding on streets and sidewalks areas that don't drain properly. The high 65. Chillier tonight, overnight low of 45. Some rain and drizzle at times as well. Right now we have rain and 54 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel, KMOX News.
The show, sponsored by Straight Realty, your St. Louis area experts. Why pay more than 4? 314-441-4444.
All right, it's 105 on the show here on KMOX. Chris Ranji, Amy Marks, Kors, Kevin Wheeler with you here. And happy to have Drake Greenberg with us. He is special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office of the FBI. Obviously, a lot to cover. But first, Jay, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you coming in studio. And I guess a lot of places we could start, but I guess the easiest is the beginning here. What typically is the involvement of the FBI when we have something like this happening? In this case, involving the local police department. What is typically your guys' role in this?
Sure. So every time there's an active shooter anywhere in the country, the process looks fairly similar, which is the local officials are always the first ones on the scene. They're really built for response and for interdicting any kind of violent threat like that, just like you saw yesterday with those heroes from St. Louis Metro. I'd also like to point out fire, EMS, the teachers, the administration, the faculty in the school, everybody trains for this, unfortunately, these days, because we've seen such a rise in the number of these kind of school shootings. And so everybody has a playbook that they follow. But what we do is we respond right along with all the other first responders. So I happened to be in my car at the time this happened. With a couple of the other executives from my office. We heard the radio calls going out for an active shooter to school. We deployed, we got our crisis apparatus going back at the office so that we could make sure that we had an intelligence center to really exploit everything that would come out from what we knew would be the following investigation. Responded on scene. St. Louis Metro had already responded, neutralized the threat. And so then it became, how do we effectively manage? There's an investigative side, but there's also the public safety and public awareness side. So the first sort of questions that we're trying to figure out is, how many shooters were there? Are there any linkages there that we need to be worried about with follow-on potential events or other attacks that may be connected in conspiracy? Is there anybody else involved? And then we have to think immediately about victim services. And in yesterday's example, reunification of kids and parents that we have to start thinking about immediately. And obviously the media plays a critical role in helping message all of that on behalf of the administration and law enforcement.
You mentioned the playbook for a situation like this. Was there an FBI playbook for a school shooter before Columbine? And if so, did Columbine in any way change the protocol for that?
So every time we go through a tragedy like yesterday, we do what are called hot washes afterwards. And that's where we get in a room as an organization and with our partners as well, because we'll have separate mandates on how to respond, and we look at what happened, what developed during yesterday's incident, what did we prepare for, what did we think about, what did we have as sort of built out for a standard response, and what was something that we didn't know how to handle it immediately, or that we had to think through some complication that we didn't foresee. And so we have, just like everybody who's adapting to ongoing circumstances, will have rolling procedures that we constantly update.
So local law enforcement takes point on the investigation of what happened there immediately from now on, or from, I guess, the hours after the fact. What is your role then? And especially in something like this, where we know who the shooter is. There were 2 victims. There are still, 2 deceased victims. There are still some in the hospital. What happens now, and what has been going on for the last several hours?
So local law enforcement has been and generally will remain in charge of that investigation. We're here as an apparatus with experience nationwide in conducting these investigations, and we will do everything we can in support of our local partner in this investigation. So what does that really mean for everybody? It means that law enforcement, regardless of level and role, is a single team responding, number 1, to eliminate the threat, number 2, to identify anybody else who may be contemplating something similar or maybe connected to or acted as an accessory, like made that attack possible. And then ultimately, it'll go to prosecution. But at all cases, it is St. Louis Metro was in the lead yesterday. St. Louis Metro remains in the lead today. And we simply are collaborating with them. We don't say deconfliction anymore, because deconfliction makes it sound like we're doing this and you're doing that, and let's agree on that. It really is a meeting where we come together and say, hey chief, hey lieutenant, hey detective, here's what we can do. What do you need? How can we help?
And that includes, at least from your perspective, the life of the weapon and the ammunition and where he got all of this stuff, right? I mean, this is part of what you investigate.
Absolutely. So, and all of us investigate together. So really, when it comes to investigating provenance of, origination of firearms, from a federal level, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, ATF is the lead on that. And so they were on scene. They had a TAC team on scene. We had a TAC team on scene. St. Louis Metro had a number of officers on scene, their TAC teams on scene. We all had bomb assets on scene, bomb defusing assets, and there were dogs there. So it was a huge response effort. Everybody goes in immediately to identify, are there victims we haven't discovered that we need to get help to? And I really want to highlight, St. Louis Fire EMS, those men and women went in there when there was still, that building was not cleared. We didn't know if there were shells, there were bombs, there was unexploded ordnance, there were IEDs, there was another shooter. They rushed through that door just like everybody else, looking for victims to see if medical care needed to be given and if we could save a life.
Jay Greenberg is with us, special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office of the FBI. So the next thing, you're going through this checklist of things. We have to clear the building, have to find out who the shooter is. Do they have help? And then we have this phenomenon that we all learned about yesterday, where we start finding other people making threats. in other school districts, in other schools. I had a text from a friend last night who showed me some of the screenshots of what a kid had sent to his friends on social media. How often is that the case in every one of these things? Do you start to see all of those as a part of the natural follow-up and now a part of your routine in investigating?
Yes. And unfortunately, this is really where we need the public's help. So we have received, in the wake of yesterday's tragedy, state level authorities, local authorities across all municipalities here in St. Louis area have received dozens and dozens of these, what we hope to be hoax threats to shoot up a school today, tomorrow, the next day. And so we have to treat each one of those as a possible attack against life until we can disprove it. And so now, if you think about it in your own lives, if you're trying to prove a negative, we're trying to prove a negative with 100% accuracy every single time, which means that we all have to take men and women offline who will be conducting this investigation or would be conducting community policing or would be policing elsewhere. So if you look across St. Louis Metro today, you probably see, and our kids see, a huge amount of law enforcement in schools today. And that's because with the amount of threats that we've received yesterday into overnight and into today, we know that we can't chase each one of those down to where we're comfortable with it at the point where school started today. So almost all of our local departments have surged their officers into schools to act as a choke point, because if an attack is going to happen there, they're going to have an armed response ready to go.
Wow. So if people are seeing and hearing these things, what should they do? Where should they go? Is there a way they can reach out?
Absolutely. They can call 911. They can call 1-800-CALL-FBI.
Okay.
They can report it online at tips.fbi.gov. So if it's an electronic tip and they want to report it to us, they can do so at the fbi.gov website. That's an area where you can easily funnel social media, where they can pick up the phone and call 911, and that will get an immediate response with somebody on the phone.
I know some people, well, a lot of kids who do something like this are not really thinking clearly at the time. Maybe they think it's funny. Maybe it's just that simple. What is the deterrent? I mean, other than to say, hey, don't do it. I mean, there has to be some kind of punishment for a person who submits a fake, threat.
Yeah, it's a great point, Chris. And I can tell you that every single person we can identify who is here, who has made one of these threats, is going to have an uncomfortable knock on the door as quickly as we can get them identified and get somebody there.
Yeah.
And that conversation, I've been involved in those conversations in people's living rooms with, a 12-year-old kid and a mom and a dad. And we come back and we say, hey, who had this handset yesterday at 7:03 p.m.? Who's the one who this came back to? And, mom and dad are looking at their son or daughter there. It's not always a child. We do see adults engage in this as well, and adults get different treatment. They're much easier to prosecute under federal law. So in each one of these circumstances, what we do is we look at the actual words used in the threat. We have to treat each one as a potential threat. So there are different outcomes. Some of them are prosecuted, and some of them are dealt with by us going to the house and saying, hey, we're here. That's not funny. And, that can never happen again. If there is a crime, they can be prosecuted state and local side. They can be prosecuted on the federal side as well.
Great information. We'll look forward to, want to remind everybody away, at FBI St. Louis on Twitter. There's a link there for the tips as well, in case people didn't write that down or couldn't remember the tips.fbi.gov, but it's also on Twitter at FBI St. Louis. Can you hang around for a little bit?
Absolutely.
Great. Jay Greenberg is with us. He is special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office of the FBI. We'll follow up with some more questions with him next up on the show.
For everything online, it's Odyssey.com. Download the Odyssey app and listen to The Dave Glover Show and all the news, talk, sports, and podcasts that move you. Odyssey, that's AUDACY.
We're all on this planet together, so join Odyssey and find your one thing. Now that it's autumn, check window and door seals for proper insulation and replace your furnace air filter. Join Odyssey, and together, each of us doing one thing makes a greener tomorrow. What's your one thing?
Do you know how much of your life savings you could lose in the next market downturn? Are you okay with the stock market controlling your financial future, or would you like to have more control? Hi, I'm Ken Heisey of Heisey Advisory Group. Our team can stress test your retirement portfolio and give you the confidence to enjoy your retirement without having to worry about what the stock market is doing. Call 314-328-4400 today. That's 314-328-4400 and schedule your complimentary retirement roadmap review with our team. That's 314-328-4400. Again, 314-328-4400.
IZ Advisory Group provides insurance services. Investment advisory services offered through AE Wealth Management, LLC. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Hey, Ed Brock, everybody. If you love Halloween like I do yourself a favor and visit Johnny Brock's Dungeon. Why shop those tiny pop-up shops when you can shop 30,000 square feet of locally owned Halloween fun? We're open all year at I-44 in Jefferson on the edge of Soulard. Johnny Brock's Dungeon, a St. Louis must-see.
The first thing you're going to have to learn is that until you stop expecting our politicians or anyone else to change your life isn't going to change. The only person who can change your life is you, but you need to know how.
Want to learn how? Meet Bill Wumsley's Lifestyles Unlimited team and get your map to retirement in 5 years or less. Saturday and Sunday, November 5th and 6th in St. Louis. Go to GiveMeTotalFreedom.com. That's GiveMeTotalFreedom.com. Limited seating, unlimited potential. Register now at GiveMeTotalFreedom.com.
Get great money for your old money. SNL Coin is always buying Morgan Silver dollars and Peace dollars. SNL Coin is always buying Walking Liberty half dollars and Franklin half dollars. SNL Coin is always buying 90% silver coins, dimes, and quarters. SNL Coin is always buying silver bullion rounds and bars. Call SNL Coin, 9300 Gravoy Road, 544-3600 before you sell. SNL Coin also buys scrap gold, gold-filled, silver plate items, and sterling flatware. Precious metal gets you better money at SNL Coin.
Work or play, KMOX is right there with you. We go where you go.
All right, coming up on 120 on the show, Chris Ranji, Amy Marks, Kors, Kevin Wheeler with you. Our guest in studio, Jay Greenberg from the FBI, special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office.
And we were just talking about after a school shooting like yesterday, you get the hoaxes increased, tenfold, 100-fold, whatever it may be, and how the FBI has to pursue each one as if it is a credible threat that takes resources away from an active investigation to those other threats until they can be 100% disproved. Can you give an example of a disproven threat, like what that might look like?
Sure. So many, many years ago, I was a supervisor over just a squad of agents, about 10 agents and a handful of intelligence personnel as well. And it was a white collar squad. There's no emergencies in white collar, right? It only happens between 8 and 5. Well, one of my agents happened to be on overnight duty, and we received a threat of a possible school shooting that had just come in through a game room chat. And because the company who hosted that game room was in our territory in Dallas, Texas, it fell to us to get with the company and investigate and figure out where it came from. So overnight, I went into the office. My agent was in the office, and overnight, we pulled all the strings we could on the investigation. Ultimately, we found that the juvenile, who was teenage years but still living at home and juvenile age, was actually in another country. So at that point, we had to get our country delegate out of bed and get the federal police from that other country out of bed, because we didn't know if the child was going to do a school attack in that country. And ultimately, those national police rolled out and were at the kid's house the next morning before school. And so it was a really rude breakfast conversation that the national police had with that family. So to show you scope and scale, we don't know, with the way that the internet is global, when we see these threats come in, it can be a 314 area code. It can be something that resolves back to the St. Louis area, but in fact, it may be somewhere else and absolutely in the digital world. So each one of these we have to run down and try to keep people safe globally.
The goal obviously is to stop something before it happens, before the shooter even gets to a school or gets to an office building or whatever it is. It seems like an impossible task, but I'm sure it gets done. There are successes where you are able to locate somebody before they carry out an act. What kinds of things are you looking for, and how do you stop those ahead of time?
Sure. So each one of these generally starts the same way, which is either a cry for help from the family an anonymous tip from somebody in the community, an anonymous tip from a provider, a named tip from a healthcare provider. So more and more, we're seeing the intersection of sort of mental wellness, resiliency, and mental illness issues with possession of a firearm, particularly here in America. And that's of grave concern to us. So, certainly different states have different laws in terms of what we can share with them, what they can share with us. Sometimes those are helpful. Sometimes those are barriers for us. But what we see more and more is that, an outcry for help or somebody whose life isn't going the way that they want it to go may look at this as an opportunity to gain notoriety and live forever. And that's why the FBI has started, and we advocate for the no name campaign. So, we'll never repeat the name of the shooter from yesterday. We don't want there to be any kind of glorifying or normalizing of the behavior. So we'll know it for investigative purposes, and we'll be following up as appropriate. But there's no benefit in glorifying. Yesterday was a tragedy. It was a terrible loss of life, and spawning from that, there's so much tragedy that we haven't figured out yet about trauma that different students and faculty and people in the community have experienced that will take years to tease out. So there's no glory to be had from yesterday.
Off air a few minutes ago when we were talking, you mentioned how much you guys pay attention to the numbers. You track everything. We know about the ones that happen. You mentioned that you know about even all of these hoaxes and all of these threats that may be real, maybe not. How many of the ones that never happen were potential threats, like really ones that you had to cut off at the pass? I don't know if that's a fair question or not. Maybe more generality than a specific number there.
Sure. So, some of the struggle with this is that when we see a threat up front, there are some that are clearly potential to be prosecuted, and some based on the language that's in the threat. Right away, we know they'll never be prosecuted, but they may still pose a threat to a community or a school or a family. Each one of these we have to run down. And these days, we no longer really define success as a law enforcement mitigation, an arrest, right? Getting somebody arrested, and now we can count that as a law enforcement statistic. We really look at how can we get whoever thought this was a good idea to understand this was a terrible idea. And if it's not prosecutable, this prosecution is not the right answer in every case. Maybe they need a different, maybe they need a big brother, big sister program. Maybe they need a different environment at home. Maybe they need some mental health or some counseling resources so that they can sort of change their view of acceptable behavior, so that what we, at the end of the day, wind up with is a really productive member of society who is contributing as opposed to tearing down. So we don't really look at just prosecutable cases in terms of numbers anymore. We know annually that the number of hoax threats we deal with are in the thousands. In the wake of yesterday, we're dealing with dozens and dozens that we're running on full bore right now across the entire St. Louis metro area. And unfortunately, to your earlier question, we have seen after a school shooting, to me, there is this inexplicable spike in school shooting threats that happen that the area has to deal with.
When you say, right away sometimes that something will not be prosecuted, what do you mean by that?
So language matters.
Okay.
So we're always bringing federal charges. The primary charge that we use on the federal side is interstate communication of a threat. And based on the history of that law and how it's been prosecuted in the country, there are some parameters that generally we see have to be there, with specificity that would go into whether or not we think that charge would fit. Now, there are a host of other charges that we could bring to bear in terms of how a firearm was purchased or possession or transfer of a firearm. So there are a number of statutes we would look at, but generally speaking, we can see on the face of some of these that we can immediately rule out that prosecution will happen unless there's another factor we discover. So we're still going to go full bore on that. And if we can find specificity, we'll go find a door to knock on and a family to intervene in.
Other than taking care of the other threats, whether they're hoaxes or whether there's some reality to them, what is the job now for the FBI in this area? You're going to be assisting the local law enforcement, as we talked about earlier, but is there one priority above anything else?
Well, we're going to look at for yesterday, there's a couple of different mandates. So there's the investigative mandate, right, which is everything that we talked about, supporting the local police, asking them, hey, what is the focus of your investigation at this point? Where is it leading? When ATF comes back with sort of gun and sourcing, that firearm, is there something we can do to support that, to develop more information and make sure that that was legitimate, everything was handled the right way? And then we'll go back afterwards and figure out what could we have done differently during the crisis yesterday, and then with everything we learned from the investigation prior to the crisis. Is there something we could have advocated for, like a change in how firearms are transferred in a state, or a change in how we share information with the local resources or state resources ahead of time? So, for instance, Missouri does not have a red flag law, right here. Right. What that means is the information that we maintain in our systems, there are some impacts into how we share that with local law enforcement here. In states where they do have red flag laws, law enforcement may have access to additional information that local law enforcement does not have here because of a lack of red flag law. So to be clear, I am not a legislator. I am a law enforcement officer, which means that we enforce the codes that are on the books federally. We work with our local partners who enforce the laws that are on the books locally and for the state. We certainly have laws that make our jobs easier and harder everywhere that we work, but all we do is enforce the laws. And the question is, do you have the laws that you want here in the state to govern your community?
Well, again, I want to remind everybody, if you're hearing anything about these threats that are coming up in the wake of yesterday's shooting, tips.fbi.gov, and you can find a link to that also at FBI St. Louis on Twitter. Jay, thank you so much. Really informational. We really appreciate your time today, and hopefully we can calm all of this down and get back to letting you guys do business as usual, I guess, which is always kind of this stuff, right?
It is, but thank you. We'd like that as well, and we look forward to working in with the community and with law enforcement to make everybody safe here. So really appreciate being on the show with you today.
Jay Greenberg with us in studio, special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office of the FBI. Stick around, more of the show coming up after the news.
Looking for smart, intelligent conversation in your afternoon.
Isn't it amazing to you guys, observing life, how smart the American public is? Because we all knew that.
Then you need The Dave Glover Show.
Whenever I did jury trials, I always trusted the juries. Like, somehow they took it seriously, and I typically came to the right conclusion, even if it was against me. Like, yeah, you got me on that. And I feel that way about the American people as a whole. Like, we're smart.
Make the smart choice. The Dave Glover Show. Weekdays beginning at 2 on KMOX.
Hey guys, Glover here from my friends at Zero Res, carpet cleaning experts. Great time of year to get your carpets cleaned. Football season, the kids are back from break. They're running around the house. They're playing games. They're rolling around on the carpet. You have the holidays coming up. It's cold and flu season, and we all know that your carpets hold in things like that, just nastiness and dirt and dander and dust and skin cells and pet stuff and pizza because of the laws of gravity. Well, this month's DGS KMOX special is the more you clean, the more you save. Get 3 rooms of carpet clean starting at just $129, or get 5 rooms starting at just $199. That is a 43% savings. Book now to get the best carpet cleaning deal of this season. And don't forget about your air ducts, $75 off air duct cleaning. And don't forget, Zero Res is hiring right now. So give us a call, 314-474-2020 or ZeroResSTL.com. Spell it backwards, spell it forwards, ZeroResSTL.com.
It is 1:30. I'm Carol Daniel. Right now, we do have some rain falling still in the area. It has cleared out in some parts of the region. Cloudy and 52 degrees downtown at the Arch.
It appears that he came into the building with more than 600 rounds of ammunition on his person.
That's Acting St. Louis Police Chief Michael Sack with an update this morning on the suspect from yesterday's school shooting. He went on to say they found something in the suspect's car.
There was a document that he had created, handwritten, and then there he spoke about his desire to engage in this incident, to conduct this school shooting.
Congresswoman Cori Bush will host an in-person town hall Thursday evening at 6 p.m. to talk about what she calls the urgent crisis of gun violence and school safety. She'll be joined by New York Congressman Jamal Bowman, who is vice chair of the House Committee on Education and Labor. The town hall on school safety will take place at St. Louis Community College in Florissant Valley. Democrat John Fetterman and Republican Mehmet Oz will meet tonight for one of the most highly anticipated debates of this election year. A police commissioner says a car crash that killed 4 teenagers in Buffalo, New York may have been linked to a TikTok car theft challenge. Authorities say the teens died when the Kia they were riding in crashed early Monday. The car had been reported stolen Sunday. 4 of the 5 passengers were killed, the 5th hospitalized in intensive care. The KMOX forecast: look for this rain to end to rain and drizzle at times. Early on, it'll be chilly tonight, overnight low of 45, and then a sunny day tomorrow, but seasonably cool. Look for high of 61. Right now it's cloudy and 52 degrees downtown at the Arch. I'm Carol Daniel, KMOX News.
Women's health decisions should be between herself and her doctor, not up to politicians like Jennifer Cordy. Cordy won't protect a woman's right to choose. She'll ban it completely. Cordy says women who are raped and then end the pregnancy are making a decision they regret later.
Politicians like Jennifer Cordy will make us less safe and less free. I'm Katie Stewart, candidate for state representative. I'll protect a woman's right to choose and ensure women have access to critical health services. I'm committed to ending violence against women by investing in domestic violence shelters and health care for survivors. I'm Katie Stewart. I'm fighting to make our communities safer. I voted to increase funding for more police and high-tech crime-fighting resources. It's why I've been endorsed by the FOP.
I trust Katie Stewart to make the right choice for all women in the state of Illinois.
I'm Katie Stewart. I'm focused on real results for our families. Paid for by Friends for Katie Stewart.
Driven by the Bomarito Automotive Group, the voice of St. Louis, KMOX.
As the Salvation Army celebrates 75 years of Tree of Lights in St. Louis, we hope your business will share support for those less fortunate by displaying an angel tree this November. You provide the tree, the Salvation Army supplies the angel ornaments, each with a list of Christmas needs and wants from a child. Customers and employees pick an ornament and bring happiness to kids. Angel Tree locations will be listed online starting October 3rd. For more information, contact Angel Tree Coordinator Lauren Shelton at 314-646-3141 or visit SalArmyMidland.org.
Hello, this is Chad Clayman with ClaymanGroup.com, KLAMEN Group.com, 314-946-9999. We buy houses direct. If you're thinking about selling, you're not sure where you're going to go, you can sign a contract with us. We are the buyer, and we can provide a flexible closing date for you. Once we've written a contract, we can actually adjust the closing date if you need to move it up or you need to move it back. A lot of people aren't sure where they're going to move next, and we can make it easy on you. ClaymanGroup.com, 314-946-9999, 946, all nines.
Equifax Inc. seeks a site reliability engineer in St. Louis, Missouri to work in a DevOps environment responsible for the building and running of large-scale, massively distributed, fault-tolerant systems. Requires a bachelor's degree in computer science or a related field. Willing to accept foreign education equivalent, plus 5 years of experience in developing and administering software in public cloud. Or alternatively, a master's degree and 3 years of experience as stated above. Email resume to jobs.opportunities@equifax.com. Reference position number 10616.
Your home of the Cardinals.
Arenado swings and hits it deep to left field. That ball is out of here.
The Billikens.
Jumper. Yes! Billikens win!
The Chiefs.
Touchdown! Kansas City!
We are America's sports voice, KMOX.
All right, it's 1:35 on the show. Many thanks again to Jay Greenberg from the FBI, special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office, for joining us to lay all of that out. It is fascinating. You know, we hear about, because you hear it from friends, or you might hear a news report here or there, or hear it on KMOX about these threats that follow a shooting. And this has happened for all of them. They're not all real threats. Some of them are hoaxes, but some of them are potentially real. And, you know, as Jay described, they've got to track them all down. I mean, there's not one that they can just rule out. They have to track them all down.
Yes, and what an extraordinary waste of resources to have the FBI go after dozens and dozens and dozens of hoaxes because you have to make sure, as Jay said, that you can disprove them 100%, and that's hard to do. But you have to do it to keep people safe. And so, Raj, you pointed out the deterrent to kids or whoever may be making these hoax statements or calls or what it may be. Having the FBI knock on your door cannot be a pleasant thing. And then, Wheels, you brought up, if you want to go to college, if you've got plans for your future, you might want to consider that.
Yeah, he was mentioning, I think there's like a 5-year statute of limitation on these types of things. So if you get yourself in trouble, you end up, caught up in doing something stupid and you get caught, you get charged.
They have 5 years to come after you.
Yeah,
like I
it's
think
not going away. They have time. So, but it can also be something that eventually can be a problem for you if you're going to college. Can be something that's part of your record. So I mean, it's hard to get into. Like there's a way to deter some kids, but a lot of the people doing this are not thinking of those things. They're not worried about those things. They're doing it on an impulse, or in some cases they're troubled themselves and may not be on the verge of doing it, or may be on the verge of actually doing it, which is what they have to sort out. But they're also not even considering potential ramifications. But yeah, it's something that, you do it now. It doesn't mean if you don't get in trouble like today, it doesn't mean there won't be trouble for it a year from now or 2 years from now. It's still there.
And they'll punish you as best they possibly can. Your age is going to have a lot to do with it. Obviously, the language that's used and what the specific threat is. But I know that for me, and I'm not everybody, but if I were 13 years old and I did something like this and the FBI showed up at my house, I'd probably be a little terrified. But I would think most kids would be. But if you're not in the right frame of mind, maybe that's not the kind of thing that even really concerns you. But the point is, there are a lot of resources that have to be redirected to your silly hoax or whatever it is that you've called in or put on Instagram or on TikTok, the threat. You've shown a photo of a gun or a video of a gun and said, I'm going to do this. This is not a joke. I mean it. Whatever it is, even if you don't mean it, you are wasting resources. So, I mean, they're going to handle it as best they can. We know that. And it's just unfortunate they have to deal with it.
And at this point, what they'll end up doing, as Jay mentioned, they're helping out with resources if STLPD needs help. Because there may be things that you don't have a database on. But this case in and of itself is, I don't know about every bit of it. I'm sure they're going to continue to walk through the step by step of how this got to the point where it did. But again, we know the basics. Who the shooter is. The motivation. In fact, that's something that we'd actually get back to this yet. Let's do this now because we heard Interim Chief Sack read the letter that explained. I mean, this is the letter they found inside the car of the shooter that at least gives us the insight into that particular mindset.
I'll read one portion from that notebook in which he had written. He wrote, quote, "I don't have any friends. I don't have any family. I've never had a girlfriend. I've never had a social life. I've been an isolated loner my entire life. This was the perfect storm for a mass shooter." End quote.
So that's what they found written down, part of what they found written down inside the car, his car that was outside the building. It's obviously very specific. It certainly fits the profile.
It's the cliche profile.
Right.
Of the kind of exact thing you would expect somebody like that to say.
I'm gonna pause on what I was gonna say because it would just be guessing at what we don't know. But this is part of what's left to discern is, okay, how much, where does this go? But really this motivation is, I don't want to say irrelevant because it can be revelatory in terms of understanding people who do these things and then therefore perhaps heading it off down the road. So I think it's important in that regard. But what I think is important from an outcome standpoint now, I think you guys would agree, is how he was able to get all of the things that he got. How he was able to get the AR-15 style rifle that police described, how he was able to get 600 rounds of ammunition. And again, there's so many questions about the how, and we don't have those answers at this point. They're still going through that when the question came up at the press conference today. Chief Sack did not have that info. In fact, said that we can't really answer that because we're still investigating, when they were talking about whether the gun was purchased from a dealer. And apparently there was an attempt to buy at a gun show that was rejected, apparently because of his state of mind. There was something observable about his behavior that led to that rejection. But they didn't want to comment on that next step, which was clearly, I don't know. I guess that's the next thing we have to have an answer to, right? I mean, I don't want to jump to a conclusion because they don't have one, we don't have one. But that's clearly the next thing that has to be solved is, okay, there was a rejection here. How did this weapon get sold? And then, of course, you got to track down the means by which those rounds, the 600 rounds of ammunition, were purchased.
I want to go back momentarily to the idea of, the school shooter or what his motivation was, or, the quote unquote copycat, whatever it may be. There was a really interesting study done by Stanford sociologist Mark Granovetter. Malcolm Gladwell wrote about it in the New Yorker, but it basically looks at the thresholds. And as we see school shootings increase, is it that there is a greater number of people, generally young men, who are willing to go this far? Or is it that the standard for go this far has been lowered, meaning the threshold has been lowered because you're hearing more and more about this? The example that Granovetter gave was like a riot. Many people may not be the first one to throw a brick through a window, but once the first brick is thrown, it's a little bit easier to throw the second brick. And is there something to that somehow, for whatever reason, this type of action, these people, whatever their motivations may be, are going to it more quickly. And I think they're still trying to figure that out. What is it? Why are we seeing this, the proliferation of it? Is it partly because it's easier to have the weaponry necessary for it? I don't know, but I do think the school shootings seem to be increasing, that we're seeing this, and to figure that out, to figure out how to stop it.
Yeah, it's not getting better. I think it's pretty obvious that's not getting better. And this is not, I think the instinct for a lot of people is to then say, well, we're focusing on school shootings. What about all the murders that take place in the city all the time? Well, yeah, we're worried about that too. We could be worried about all of these things, and we can try to do something to make sure they're not as much of a problem as it is now. But there has to be, I use the word appetite for this, there has to be an appetite across the board. And you know what? It seems to me that as far as the public is concerned, even by gun owners, they want there to be stricter laws. They want there to be more measures in place to make sure this guy isn't able to buy that weapon with all of those bullets the way he was able to buy them. And we still don't know all the details about how he was able to do it. And we're going to hopefully find those things out soon. It was from a private dealer. It sounds as though he was turned down by another dealer at one point when he tried to purchase weapons. So we'll see why that happened, hopefully, and then find out exactly all the details about how he bought this weapon and all that ammo. But there is an appetite on the public level to do something about this and to make it tougher. There just doesn't seem to be enough appetite from the right people who are in positions of power. And when I mean positions of power, when I say that, I'm talking about people who run for Congress, who run for state office, who probably, they get a favorable rating from the NRA, or they get funds from the NRA for their campaigns. And those kinds of people are holding back what it seems like the public wants and realizes is important and doable and popular, and we should do those things. Because if we do those things, we lessen the chances that yesterday happens. And there are a lot of layers of security that we can have. We can talk about having the security guards armed at the school at the checkpoints. We can talk about reinforcing the windows around buildings and doors and make sure everything's locked. That's another layer of security we can have. But the best and the first layer of security is to make sure that dude doesn't have a gun and 600 bullets. That's the best thing we can do.
And it's hard. I don't think anybody suggests that there's an easy, simple thing, because compromise is hard, but it's meant to be. The idea of coming to a compromise, the idea of protecting some things and giving it on another is difficult to do, but it's okay. Difficult things can be done. We've done difficult things many, many, many times in the city of St. Louis and the state of Missouri.
Difficult's not a reason to not do things.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And we can't get caught in absolutisms either. There shouldn't be an absolute can't do anything. You may say there may be a limit to what you can start with. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about a start. We don't have to talk about anything that is beyond common sense or beyond simply addressing this particular problem, right? I don't know, that's maybe a lot of words to say a simple thing. Because what I'm trying to say is fixing this type of problems doesn't mean taking everybody's guns away.
Well, it never has meant that.
It doesn't mean that.
Nobody serious ever suggests that.
Right. It doesn't mean that. But discussion is going to, unfortunately, have that involved, because we can't do anything without turning everything into a gigantic fight. But that hopefully will not be a fight. Hopefully we can have rational conversations about those things moving forward. Chris Raji, Amy Marks, of course, Kevin Wheeler with you here. We'll wrap it up next and get you ready for DGS here on the show.
Why should I buy from you? Always ask. Hi, I'm Chuck Easter with Easter Fence Deck and Renovations. When working with Easter, you know it's not just about making a buck. Our commitment is to do what's right. We are a third-generation family business. A lot of pride goes into every fence, deck, and sunroom. Our name is on it, and we guarantee it. Even if it was the first job Dad did in 1957, if we didn't do it right or didn't do what we said, we'll fix it for free. Call 314-892-8500 or easterfence.com.
Ask yourself, what am I doing to guarantee I will have adequate, inflation-hedged income that I may never outlive? Why not make sure your future income is growing and may last as long as you do? Call for your complimentary retirement and income book at 844-513-SAFE. That's 844-513-7233. And also join me, Ben Coons, for the Retirement and Income Radio Show, heard here every Saturday at 3 p.m. on KMOX Radio.
The show, sponsored by Straight Realty, your St. Louis area experts. Why pay more than 314-441-4444.
Dude, I'm here for the show. What show?
St. Louis, this is your show.
The show.
The show on KMOX.
Well, yesterday at this time, it was a lot more unknowns than we have now, but none of these unknowns that are now parts of things that we understand have been explained to us by the police, by those investigating. Doesn't make it, this is not going anywhere. The story is continuing to evolve. We do know the ultimate result, that a 19-year-old shooter took 2 lives. 15-year-old Alexandria Bell did not go home yesterday and will not. 61-year-old teacher Jean Kushka could not go home yesterday and will not. And it's that should be presenting the urgency. And I guess to close, guys, I think that we've heard this comment and it's accurate. And I'm glad that we can say this, that it could have been worse. It is accurate. It could have been. And I am glad that it is not worse. But that's a pretty low bar when we're talking about loss of life. I mean, I know none is not a realistic statistical possibility, but that should be the goal.
Yeah. Just a few things that, I'm thinking of as we wrap up the show today. I really appreciated what the FBI special agent Jay Greenberg said about the EMT and the medical staff, the first responders rushing in, because of course the St. Louis police officers were so quick to respond. Mm-hmm. Their quick actions helped saved, who knows how many lives, but also the medical staffs, the EMTs ran into the building, as Jay mentioned, before it was secure. So they ran in while there was still potential danger in the building to help those who had been hurt. I think that's such an important note when it comes to the first responders and the way they were rushing toward the the gunfire rushing towards those who were hurt. And also our conversation about the mental health side of things. This from those who are grieving, this from those who are dealing with trauma. Yes, if you are going through something, if you've had a traumatic experience like this, be proactive, seek help, get a counselor or a therapist, but also just in the same way that an athlete gets treatment even when there's no injury. My goodness, I go to a chiropractor or a massage therapist even when I'm not injured to stay healthy. We can do the same things with our mental health. It's no different. Make sure that you're staying proactive in that. You can see a counselor, see a therapist, talk to someone because you're not alone. I think that's so important, especially coming out of COVID and we've been more isolated than ever before. It's not good to be alone. It's not good to be isolated, and you're not alone. There are people who love you and want to help.
That mental health line, by the way, is 988. That's if you're calling from your mobile phone. So they can, and whether you're in crisis for yourself or you are worried about somebody else, that's the number they want you to call. And if you do that, they can, get you the help you need. And 988 it's a mobile number, by the way, if I didn't say that already. So if you're calling from your cell phone, 988.
And then Ranj, I will say too, I love what we talked about earlier. If you think someone is lonely or someone is hurting, reach out, send a text, stop by, bring over cake or whatever it is. And don't say, hey, is there anything I can get? Say, I am going to get this for you.
Well, I mean, the thing you really don't want to do is say, if you ever need me, let me know if you need something.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, that person's not going to let you know.
Yeah.
They're just not. Some
Sometimes they're not able to.
They're not able to, or sometimes they're just. Many times they're just not.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to reach out. They don't think they want to bother you, and that's true. Even because it's an empty gesture for a lot of people to say, "Hey, let me know if you need anything." Like they don't necessarily mean that. They're just trying to say something in the moment. So if you really want to help somebody, just help them.
Yeah.
Or tell them, I'm going to bring over something. I'm going to call you and we're going to talk or whatever. Do it. Just don't wait for somebody to ask you for help. If you think somebody needs help, be there.
And you're not bothering them. You're not bothering them. Go do it. And,
even if you are. So.
And even if you are. I keep going back to that story from this girl, Elise Myers. Said in her darkest time, a hairstylist quite literally said, I've made an appointment for you. I'm going to wash your hair. And this hairstylist did it for free. And Elise said, even in her deepest depression, when she couldn't shower, she would just almost, you're in a robotic mode almost because she was so depressed. And she would show up to get her hair washed. And she said, because of that hairdresser making her get her, taking her in, making her get her hair washed, she is alive today. She's here today because of that.
And it's such a simple gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's all it really takes is to just do something simple for somebody else.
And it's also, I think, and when we were talking to Dr. Bozenter earlier, the important thing, too, is to not just take someone's word for it. Because she said you have to assume that people are not okay in this coming out of this kind of a thing.
Right.
That can be true, obviously, of the people that are directly involved. Everybody's different. Some people put on a face like nothing's wrong. I'm totally fine. Other people are going to be right up front and say, I'm not doing well. I'm okay. You have to understand that there's no one way to respond to it, but to take that interest anyway. But even beyond people that are directly impacted, students, teachers, family members of those particular people, there are kids. I heard it from a friend yesterday whose son doesn't go to that school, doesn't even go to school in that district, who essentially was nervous and didn't want to go to school today. And I'm not talking about a little kid. We're talking about a high school age kid. I mean, there are people around there. There are going to be students around and even family members around that aren't directly impacted, but are still impacted nonetheless.
Well, if you're a kid who hasn't lived a long life yet, and you don't have a ton of experiences, you see that happen at a school that's like yours, and you think, oh, what's to prevent this from happening to mine next? Then I don't know how you do, because that's your whole world. Your high school, when you are in high school or when you're in grade school, that's almost your entire world, right? I mean, your family at home and your friends, but your friends are at school. So most of your life is lived at that school for 9 months of the year. And I think that when you see something like this happen at a place that's supposed to feel safe to you, even if it's not your school, you think mine is absolutely going to be next. And I've got anxiety about that. I'd imagine there are kids all over this region that are feeling that way today.
This is slightly different, but when it comes to helping and supporting someone, I was fortunate enough to not have lost anyone close until I was about early 20s, about 20, and my grandparents. Being there at someone's funeral or showing up at the visitation was so moving to me. You know, people that maybe you hadn't seen in a while, or neighbors that you weren't even close to, you just knew them, for them to show up at the visitation meant the world to me. I felt so loved. And, you know, because I've thought that before, like, oh, I don't know that person well, maybe I shouldn't go to the funeral, the visitation. If there's someone in your life who's lost someone, show up. You know, whether it's a text, show up in person, it means a lot.
Many thanks to all of our guests today. A lot of great information. We very much appreciate them. We appreciate you guys listening. You know, the breaking news element of this will wane in the coming days, but obviously the importance of it will not. We'll stay tuned for all developments on this case. Stick around. Dave Glover Show coming up after the news.
Men, if you're struggling with erectile dysfunction or PE and frustrated taking pills that don't work, Paramount Men's Medical Center offers breakthrough medical treatments that effectively treat your problem. 98% of patients experience immediate results during their first office visit. And for a limited time, your initial consultation and first treatment are completely free. Listen to a specialist in men's health.
I'm Dr. Brown. The physicians at